Chapter 400. What sound is that? The monkey-faced old man glared at him and lifted his right hand to strike the man's head. What sound is that? What sound is that? Shut up. The old man struck the man's head again, causing the man to quickly shrink his head back, but he did not dare avoid it. The old man let out a cold harumph and no longer bothered himself with the man. With a dark face, he charged towards the mountain range where Su Ming's cave abode was. The 6 people behind him quickly followed behind him, and the 7 of them turned into 7 long arcs that charged towards the ground. Yet the moment they flew out, and before they even got close to the mountain range, another bell chime suddenly reverberated in the air. That bell chime hummed, causing a layer of ripples that could be seen with the naked eye to appear in the sky and spread out in all directions. As the bell chime and the ripples appeared, the old man's heart trembled once again, and his expression changed. As for the 6 people behind him, they also swayed, and shock appeared on their faces. That's the sound of a soul catcher. Elder, why don't we leave? He's a medial soul catcher. As the bell chime reverberated in the air, another person behind the old man quickly spoke up to persuade them. That person's face was pale. He was only a fledgling shaman, and the bell chime seemed to have stirred up a buzzing sound in his body, causing him to almost lose his footing. Bullsh *T. The monkey-faced old man glared at him and lifted his right hand to strike the head of the person who spoke. I'll tell you what that sound is. That's indeed the sound of a soul catcher. Why don't you think about why he made that sound the moment we arrived? It's because he's afraid. Do you understand? He's afraid. That's why he made that sound. Do you know how he made that sound? That's the sound of someone knocking on a mountain rock. That's just a sound, and you're already so scared? The monkey-faced old man said with a cold harumph. Elder, you're wise and knowledgeable. So that's the sound of someone knocking on a mountain rock. The 6 people quickly nodded, and respect appeared in their eyes as they looked at the old man. It would have been fine if he didn't make that sound, but now that he did, I know that this soul catcher is afraid. For some reason, the monkey-faced old man came to this conclusion. He raised his right hand and slapped the heads of the other 6 people one by one. Grandpa, it hurts. The burly man who spoke first shrunk his head again and muttered to himself. You guys just wait here and see how I'll chase this soul catcher away. Damn it. How dare he take over my tribe's territory? The monkey-faced old man glared at them and no longer bothered himself with the 6 tribe members. Instead, he turned around and charged towards the mountain range where Su Ming was. However, when he was only 1,000 feet away from the mountain range, the bell chimes suddenly rang even louder. They spread in all directions and stirred up even more ripples. In fact, they even stirred up a violent gust of wind that caused the old man's hair to flutter. The monkey-faced old man sucked in a sharp breath. He might have been talking to his tribesmen just now, but in truth, even he did not know what that voice was. It sounded a little frightening, but he was the patriarch of White Bull tribe. He could not show any fear before his tribesmen. At that moment, he gritted his teeth and rushed forward once again while mumbling in his heart. The 6 tribesmen behind him could not help but retreat. They looked at their elder as he moved forward, listened to the increasingly louder buzzing, and looked at each other. Grandpa, you're wise. How do you know that the person is afraid of that sound? That's why he's the elder and you're not the elder. The elder is right. Look, the closer he gets, the louder the sound becomes. It's clear that he's afraid. But I don't think so. That's right, he's clearly afraid. As the 6 people discussed among themselves, the monkey-faced old man was already nearly 500 feet away from the mountain range. When he was about to step on the mountain, he took a deep breath and let out a loud roar. This mountain. Yet before he could finish speaking, he widened his eyes. His voice came to an abrupt halt, and a presence that made his skin crawl abruptly spread out from the mountain range with a bang. As that presence spread out, a gigantic illusion of 1,000 feet tall swiftly manifested before the old man. That illusion was in the shape of a bell, and once it appeared, a powerful pressure shook the sky and earth, causing the weather in the sky to change. The monkey-faced old man was struck by that pressure and shocked by the gigantic bell that suddenly appeared. Without another word, he quickly retreated. At the same time he retreated, An incredibly clear bell chime came from within the gigantic, illusory bell. That sound was several times clearer than before, and when it fell into his ears, it caused a buzzing sound. The monkey-like old man hurriedly retreated and returned to his clansmen. "Damn it, what is that?" The man behind him cried out in surprise once again. "That sound isn't from someone knocking on a mountain rock. What is that?" The people behind the old man sucked in sharp breaths. "What do you know? What do you know?" The old man seemed to have flown into a rage out of humiliation. He turned his head around and glared at them, then raised his hand and slammed it once again. "Let me tell you, what is that? It's a big bowl." The moment the old man finished speaking, the bell chime echoed in the air once again. The illusory bell that existed in the sky above the mountain range instantly gained corporeal form and revealed its complete appearance. It was entirely greenish-black in color, and it gave off an ancient air. As it floated in midair, it formed a powerful pressure that caused the old man and the people behind him to fall towards the ground, unable to withstand it. "Grandpa, that's not a bowl. Grandpa, that's really not a bowl. What is that?" The tribesmen's faces turned pale and their bodies trembled. Under that pressure, even their cultivation bases froze, and as they trembled, their expressions became dull. "Umph. Let me tell you, that's a bowl. That lad soul catcher is scared. That's why he brought out that bowl to scare us. You, and you, the two of you, go and lure that lad soul catcher out." The monkey-faced old man was nervous, but he gritted his teeth and said those words. He pointed at the two tribesmen beside him, and when he saw that they did not dare go forward, he glared at them and lifted his hand. The two tribesmen gritted their teeth and rushed forward in fear, wanting to get closer to the mountain range. Yet when they had only moved 100-something feet, a shocking roar suddenly came from Han Mountain Bell in the sky. That roar was even more terrifying than the bell chimes, causing the two men to cough out a mouthful of blood and instantly fall to the ground. When they turned their heads back to look, they saw their four companions behind their elder also coughing out blood and falling to the ground. Only the monkey-faced old man continued to stand there. However, his body was trembling. "Don't think that I don't know that you're pretending to be dead. Just you wait. Once I'm done with that lad soul catcher, I'll skin you alive when I go back." The old man stomped on the ground, and as he spread his arms wide, he bit the tip of his tongue. Once he coughed out a mouthful of blood, his presence instantly surged like a tidal wave. A gigantic, illusionary white fog also appeared behind him. That fog tumbled about and formed the outline of a bull. The old man lifted his right hand, and with a flip of his palm, a gigantic bowl appeared in his hand. That bowl was filled with clear water, and with that bowl in hand, the old man took a swift step forward while groaning in his heart. He was the patriarch of White Bull Tribe, and ever since he heard from his tribesmen that a soul catcher had appeared in this place, he had been hesitating. After waiting for a few days, the people he sent to investigate came back and told him that the place had returned to normal and that the medial soul catcher was no longer around. That was why he decided to bring his tribesmen to this place and put on an act, but he did not expect that right when he arrived, he would run into that terrifying voice. During the first few times, he could still put up a brave front and say that the voice had arrived, but when that gigantic bell appeared, he was already terrified. However, it was difficult for him to leave just like that as the patriarch. At that moment, he gritted his teeth and made up his mind to fight with his life on the line. No matter what, he had to rush up and fight against that medial soul catcher. Besides, he believed that even if he was not a soul catcher, he was still a medial shaman who had reached the peak of the medial shaman realm. The outcome of this battle was still unknown. As he rushed forward, a stern look appeared on his face. Ripples appeared on the clear water in the stone bowl in his hand, turning into a layer of water vapor around his body, allowing him to resist the bell chimes echoing in the air. As he moved forward, the two men who had fallen on the ground immediately opened their eyes and quickly crawled on the ground, returning to the spot where their companion had coughed out blood and fallen. Almost at the same time the two of them returned, the other four tribesmen who had fallen on the ground also opened their eyes. They looked at each other, and as if they had formed a telepathic connection, they quickly crawled backwards without another word. Only the old man was still charging forward. Once he got close to the mountain range, the old man no longer had the time to bother with the 6 clan members who were playing dead. He stomped on the ground with his right foot, and his body shot up from the ground. He flew into the air and charged to the top of the mountain range. At the same time, he let out another loud roar. This mountain is... Almost the instant he said those words for the second time, the area beyond the gigantic Han Mountain Bell in the sky suddenly stirred up wind and clouds. A large area of indistinct space appeared, and within that indistinct space, a gigantic ferocious beast that could not be described with words revealed itself. That ferocious beast looked like 9 aquatic dragons that had fused together. It was gigantic, and as its 9 heads spread out, it looked as if they occupied the entire sky. It was precisely the appearance of this beast that made the old man's second words die in his mouth once again. His eyes went wide, and shock as well as terror appeared within them. He swiftly retreated, and his skin crawled. When a murderous, mighty pressure descended on him with a bang, 5 of the 9 heads had their eyes closed, as if they were in deep sleep. However, the other 4 heads had their eyes wide open, and a chilling glare shone within them. Su Ming's figure appeared in the pupils of those 4 heads. What is this mountain? Su Ming's voice tumbled out from the mouths of the 4 heads that were occupied by the beast. This mountain is yours. The monkey-faced old man suddenly had an epiphany and did not dare continue retreating. He quickly put on an apologetic smile. The 3rd update is here, and there's still the 4th update. My fellow Taoists, if you still have any, don't keep them. Cast them all in one go, and let us charge forward. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Start Point and cast your recommendation votes and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 401. The old man's tone was a little strange, and when Su Ming heard it, he frowned. Speak properly. Huh? What? This mountain is yours. The old man was momentarily stunned before he quickly slowed down his speech and repeated his words. Who are you? The 4 heads of the gigantic, ferocious beast in the sky cast a glance at the old man at the same time and spoke in a booming voice. Sir Soulcatcher, I'm the patriarch of White Bull Tribe by Go. This is all a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. I didn't come here for this mountain, but when I heard my tribesmen say that Sir Soulcatcher is here, I was so excited, so excited. That's why I brought my people here to greet you. Hey, I even prepared a great gift. Please accept it. We still have matters to attend to in the tribe, so we'll be leaving first. The monkey-faced old man quickly searched his bosom and brought out a shaman crystal that was even smaller than a fingernail. His heart clenched in pain, but he did not dare refuse and placed it on the ground respectfully. He looked at the tiny shaman crystal. Any random piece Su Ming brought out would be much bigger than it, but the old man's respectful and pained expression made it seem as if the crystal he brought out was only the size of a fist. Since you're here, there's no need for you to be in such a hurry to leave. I'm currently training, so it's not convenient for me to receive guests. Wait here. Su Ming frowned. Once he said those words, he no longer paid any attention to the old man. The old shaman had extraordinary power. Even if he had not attained great completion as a medial shaman, he could still be considered to have reached the peak. However, Su Ming did not pay any attention to him. With the fire ape and the strange snake helping him, the old man would not be able to do anything. Besides, Su Ming also intended to use the chance to refine Han Mountain Bell once again to intimidate this person. This was what he thought of when he saw the old man's fear just now. When the monkey-faced old man heard Su Ming's words, he groaned in his heart. He might not be able to see Su Ming's level of cultivation, but the gigantic, ferocious beast in the sky was enough to make his heart tremble in fear and respect. He had a feeling that this gigantic beast was undoubtedly a holy beast. Although he had never heard of it before, it was clear that it was currently cultivating some kind of extremely powerful spell, which was why it had summoned a projection of the holy beast. Just where did this person come from? Only 4 of the holy beast's heads have awoken, and it's enough to make my heart pound. if all of the heads are awake. Baiga licked his lips, secretly regretting his decision to come here. He felt hatred for the clan member who had told him that the enemy had already left. At that moment, Su Ming was sitting cross-legged in his cave abode with his eyes closed. His hands were continuously forming seals before him. Each of these seals were filled with a strange feeling, and it was the vague feeling he had when he was refining Han Mountain Bell in the past. As he changed his seals, a large amount of the power of the world in his cave abode instantly surged towards him and gathered on his hands. It was as if these seals could stir up the power of the world. Su Ming's spirits were lifted, and the speed at which he formed the seals became faster. Eventually, his hands became a blur, and he left behind a large amount of afterimages. As he did this, the four heads of the nine-headed ferocious beast in the sky outside the cave abode lifted their heads and roared towards the sky, causing the weather to change and an endless amount of ripples to spread out. At that moment, suddenly, the gigantic body of one of the five sleeping heads shuddered, as if it was about to wake up from the low roars of the four heads. Su Ming's speed at forming the seals became even faster in the cave abode. Sweat broke out on his forehead, and all of his divine sense surged out as he formed the seals with his hands. As he fused with the power of the world, he surged into Han Mountain Bell. But no matter how much he sent that strange power into Han Mountain Bell, it was as if it had sunk into the ocean. There was no reaction whatsoever. Only at that moment did he feel a faint hint of a response. It was as if there was a barrier within Han Mountain Bell. If he did not break through that barrier, then it would be difficult for him to refine it further. The instant he sensed the barrier, Su Ming circulated all of his divine sense, and with the seals as a guide, he fused with the power of the world and started ramming against the barrier. Open, open, open. Su Ming mumbled with his eyes closed, and more sweat poured down his forehead. As Su Ming spoke, the four awakened aquatic dragon heads in the sky outside the cave abode roared even more furiously. They moved their bodies and continued roaring, turning into waves of sound that shook the sky and earth, causing the old man's ears to ring. The old man's face was pale. As he looked at the four aquatic dragons in the sky, he felt as if he was an ant. As the four aquatic dragons roared in the sky, the head at the edge of the five sleeping heads started trembling even more furiously. Signs of struggle appeared in its tightly shut eyes, as if it was about to wake up. The fifth head that had been asleep for an unknown number of years felt as if it was about to wake up as Su Ming's divine sense rammed against it. Su Ming could sense it even more clearly. He could tell that once the invisible barrier was broken, then the fifth head would open its eyes. Occupying the first head meant that he had obtained initial control over Han Mountain Bell. Occupying the second head allowed Su Ming to obtain Han Mountain Bell's ability to shock souls with its chimes. Occupying the third head allowed Su Ming to sense just how powerful the bell's defense was. He obtained the ability to fuse the bell into his body so that he could protect himself. When the fourth head was occupied, Su Ming sensed some seals appearing in his head, allowing him to control the bell in a simple manner to seal the beasts. Now, once the fifth head woke up and was occupied by Su Ming, he did not know what sort of ability would appear, but he was looking forward to it. That anticipation grew stronger as time passed by. However, the barrier Su Ming could sense within Han Mountain Bell was still being rammed against, and he could not break through it. It was as if there was always something missing. Roars reverberated in the sky. Almost an hour had passed since then. As the roars continued, the ground started trembling. Even a mountain range started cracking and stones started falling off. Su Ming's body started trembling. His divine sense was starting to wither. The fire ape by his side was also feeling nervous. With its intelligence, it felt a sense of respect towards the ferocious beast in the sky. However, to the rod snake, that respect did not seem to exist. What existed was a powerful brutality that made it stare at the gigantic ferocious beast through the small hole above its head. There was puzzlement and murderous intent in its eyes. As if it had met its mortal enemy, the rod snake let out a buzzing sound, and its scales started peeling off. If it was not because it was familiar with Su Ming's presence on the ferocious beast, it would have definitely charged out immediately and would not stop until one of them died. The medicinal cauldron remained the same in the cave abode. Not a single change could be detected, but the old berserker in the other stone chamber was trembling furiously. His face was pale, and most of his blood had flowed out of his body. The remaining blood was madly absorbed by the herbs on his body. His soul was also absorbed by the 3 spirit plunders, as if it was sealed. He was already incredibly weak to begin with. As he continued hearing the roars, a roar slowly started ringing in his head, and he struggled to fight against it. He was not the only one. The 6 white bull tribe members outside the mountain range were all lying on the ground. Their bodies were trembling, and their faces were pale without a hint of blood. 4 of them had already fainted, and the 2 who were still conscious had dazed looks on their faces. They lasted a little longer than the other 4 before they fainted as well. As for the monkey-faced old man, he was sitting cross-legged on the ground and circulating the power of his cultivation base in an attempt to fight against the roars. But once he coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood, he discovered to his shock that the roars were getting stronger and stronger, making it difficult for him to fight against them. He was very close to the roars, unlike the 6 tribe members who had already run far away. At that moment, a strong sense of life-threatening danger rose from the bottom of his heart. In his fear, he immediately drank the water in the stone bowl in his hand, and a large amount of white mist spread out from his body to fight against the roars. I still won't open it. Su Ming's hair was a mess as he remained in the cave abode. As he formed the seals with his hands, he lifted his right hand swiftly and struck his chest. Immediately, a large amount of spirit stones flew out and fell around him. There were already quite a lot of spirit stone fragments around Su Ming, and as these spirit stones appeared, Su Ming's divine sense was replenished. The open path in his body started circulating as if it was liquid, causing Su Ming to let out a low growl. 5th head open. As Su Ming growled, he pushed his hands forward. With that one push, all the spirit stones around him exploded once again. His divine sense stirred up a large amount of the power of the world and rushed in a Han Mountain bell, crashing madly against the barrier. At the same time, the 4 aquatic dragon heads in the sky roared even louder. This time, they did not roar in all directions. Instead, all of them went to the trembling and struggling 5th head and roared furiously at it. Su Ming only felt a shocking roar in his head. His divine sense was like a flood in Han Mountain Bell. Once it broke through the barrier before him, it surged inside. It was also at that instant that the 5th head in the sky opened its struggling eyes. There was a merciless look in its eyes, but Su Ming's body was rapidly gathering in its pupils. In an instant, once Su Ming's body completely appeared in the 5th head's eyes, the 5th head lifted its head and let out a roar towards the sky. That roar fused together with the other 4 heads' roars and reverberated in the sky. 9 Dragon South, Emperor form kill. As the 5 heads roared, a faint voice traveled forth. The monkey-faced old shaman could no longer take it. Once he coughed out blood, he fell to the ground and fainted. The instant the 5 heads roared at the same time, a large amount of information regarding the inheritance of Han Mountain Bell appeared in Su Ming's head. In that jumbled mess of information, he learned of the new ability Han Mountain Bell gained after the appearance of the 5th head. It was the power to temporarily manifest the ferocious vessel spirit within the bell when he activated it. Su Ming's breathing quickened and excitement appeared in his eyes. He brought out a large amount of spirit stones once again and lifted his head to look at the gigantic ferocious beast in the sky. A resolute look appeared on his face. I'll do it in one go. I'll make the 6th head wake up as well. The 4 chapters today included training, fantasizing, humor, increasing combat power, and refining treasures. Is there a reason for me not to vote for a monthly vote? I'm begging for a monthly vote. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 402. I hope that my updates can stimulate the passion of all of us. I hope that my updates can make us, who are depressed, stand up and hold our heads high. I hope that my updates can be exchanged for recognition and monthly votes. This is my wish. This is my faith. My wishes can come true. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 403. The 5 nine-headed dragons were roaring in the sky, and their voices were like thunder that shook the sky. The monkey-faced old shaman could no longer withstand the pressure and fell to the ground, unconscious. The rod snake let out a piercing screech in the cave abode. By the looks of it, it looked as if it was facing a great enemy and was about to rush out at any moment. However, due to Su Ming's brand in its body and the fact that the 5 heads of the 9-headed dragon that it regarded as an enemy belonged to Su Ming, it suppressed the urge to fight. As for the old berserker in the stone abode, his eyes were tightly shut. His body trembled even more furiously. As the roars from the sky traveled into his ears, he seemed to have reached his limit with his current condition. Su Ming sat down cross-legged in the hall of his cave abode and continued forming seals with his hands. The power of the world surged towards him and fused with his divine sense before rushing into Han Mountain Bell. There was a circle of spirit stone powder around Su Ming. Fortunately, he had quite a lot of spirit stones with him, which was why he could maintain this rate of consumption. A large amount of spirit stones were continuously brought out by Su Ming, and once he absorbed all the spiritual energy within them, he would bring out an equal amount of spirit stones. With this method, gradually, more and more power surged into Han Mountain Bell. As the 5 heads in the sky roared, the 6th head of the 9-headed beast also started trembling. As it trembled, Su Ming sensed the existence of the barrier within Han Mountain Bell once again. He knew clearly that as long as he could break through that barrier, then he could make the 6th head open its eyes and wake up. However, with his previous experience before the 5th head woke up, Su Ming knew that breaking through this barrier was simply too difficult, but he did not give up. Instead, he used his spirit stones to maintain the barrier and used the power of the world around him as a guide to break through the barrier again and again. He did it 5 times in a row, and every single time he did so, the invisible barrier would tremble. As it trembled, the 6th head's body would tremble, and its tightly shut eyes would show signs of opening. However, as long as the invisible barrier was not broken, the 6th head would not wake up. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He formed a seal with his hands and pushed forward once again. Open! A bang went off in his head, and the barrier within Han Mountain Bell was struck once again. The 6th head shuddered violently, but it still did not wake up. Once he tried it 8 times, Su Ming understood that with the usual method, awakening the 5th head was the limit of his current level of cultivation. Clearly, the awakening of each head after the 4th head of Han Mountain Bell would require a vast amount of power. It would not be as easy as awakening the previous 4 heads. With his current cultivation, he was only a sliver away from awakening the 6th head. However, this sliver of difference was like a ravine that no one could overcome. If that's the case, I can only rely on external forces. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He no longer formed any seals with his hands. Instead, he stood up and took a few steps back to the deepest part of his cave abode, where there were several cracks that could allow the mountain range to breathe. The instant he closed in on the stone wall, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pushed against it. With it, the stone wall immediately trembled and new cracks appeared. Once they connected with the previous cracks, with the power of Su Ming's palm, the cracks shot through the stone wall and connected to the world outside. Due to the increase in the number of cracks, it was as if a person's breathing had suddenly become much quicker. At that instant, the entire mountain range's breathing instantly became louder, and due to it, the power of the world instantly became several times stronger. It charged towards a mountain range, causing the gigantic vortex to appear once again in the mountain range. That vortex was formed by the gathering of the power of the world. Once it appeared, it rammed into Han Mountain Bell along with Su Ming's divine sense. The barrier within the vortex let out cracking sounds in Su Ming's head, as if it was about to shatter. The sixth head also gradually lifted its head as it trembled furiously, and a slit appeared in its eyes. The method is correct. With the help of the pattern in this place, I can break through this small limit. I just need a few more breaths, and I'll succeed. Yet at that moment, Su Ming's face immediately turned pale. The power of the world was too great. His divine sense was like a lone boat in a raging wave, and it was difficult for him to guide it. After all, his level of cultivation was still not high enough. When Su Ming saw that the vast power of the world was about to scatter all over the place like a wild horse that had broken free of its reins, red appeared in his eyes. Once the power of the world spread outwards, even if he could gather it back together again, if he could not use the power of the fifth head to awaken the sixth head in one go, then unless his level of cultivation was much higher than before, he would not be able to succeed within a short period of time. In the face of this sort of result, Su Ming had to take the risk. He bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood. As it did so, the four berserker bones in Su Ming's body also trembled and erupted with all the power of the bone sacrifice realm. At the same time, the liquefied power of the aura refinement realm in the open path in Su Ming's body started circulating rapidly, and the amount of it gradually decreased. Eventually, it almost disappeared. The disappearing power of the aura refinement realm had already surged into Su Ming's divine sense, causing his divine sense to barely be able to control the power of the world just as it was about to collapse. One breath, two breaths. 2 breaths later, the vast power of the world started dispersing once again. Su Ming lifted his right hand and tapped a few spots on his body at lightning speed. Every single time his finger landed, it would be at the point where the open path in his body was connected to each other. Once he tapped a few spots, he seemed to have squeezed out the remaining power of the aura refinement realm in his body. And with the help of the power of the berserker bones in his body, he managed to delay the collapse of the power of the world for another 2 breaths. It was during these 4 breaths that the invisible barrier within Han Mountain Bell was abruptly broken. As it was broken, the sixth head's eyes flew open, and gray light shone within them. The sixth head had awakened. It lifted its head and let out a low roar, roaring at the same time as the other 5 heads. Their voices shook the sky and earth, and as they reverberated in all directions, the heavily injured old berserker in Su Ming's cave abode could no longer fight back. A small amount of blood mist erupted from his body, and he immediately fainted. This sort of fainting was a fainting of his will. Su Ming's figure appeared in the eyes of the awakened sixth head in the sky. At that moment, the 6 heads were roaring at the same time, and the momentum of their roars shook the sky and earth. It was a pity that there were not many people who saw it, and this place was also rather secluded in the land of the shamans, or else it would have definitely caught the attention of some observant people. The 9-headed dragon looked just like the sacred beast of the shaman tribe. Anyone who saw it would be unable to help themselves from being shocked. Su Ming sat cross-legged in his cave abode. At that moment, his face was pale, but his eyes were filled with excitement. He wanted to try awakening the 7th head, but his body was already weak, and he had used up a lot of spirit stones. Besides, he knew that with his current level of cultivation, it was impossible for him to awaken the 7th head. In silence, he gave up on continuing. Instead, he formed a seal with his hands and pointed upwards with his right hand. 9-headed dragon, Southern Emperor's ultimate killing form, gather. Su Ming mumbled softly. As he pointed forward, the gigantic 9-headed dragon in the sky rapidly faded away, and in the blink of an eye, it became transparent and disappeared. As for the gigantic Han Mountain Bell, it also shrank in an instant and turned into a ray of dark light that charged towards the mountain range. It crawled into the small holes above the cave abode and floated before Su Ming. Han Mountain Bell looked like an ancient bell at that moment. At the same time, it exuded an ancient air. The moment Su Ming looked at it, he had a strong feeling that this item was a part of him. Even if he closed his eyes, he could still feel its existence. And with just one thought, he could control this treasure to change. The divine ability that appeared after the 6th head awakened. is this? Su Ming closed his eyes and sensed the changes within Han Mountain Bell increasing due to the sixth head's awakening. After a long while, he opened his eyes slowly, and he was momentarily stunned. He frowned and brought out some medicinal pills. Once he swallowed them, he did not circulate them in his body. Instead, he stood up and paced around the cave abode, as if he was hesitating over something that was difficult to decide on. From the looks of it, even if one's cultivation reaches a certain level, it will not be possible to activate the seventh head. However, at the same time, once the seventh head is activated, the transformation it will display will reach an extremely frightening level. If my predictions are correct, then based on the sixth head's art, once the seventh head awakens, there's a high chance that a wisp of the nine-headed dragon's true spirit will descend. Su Ming's footsteps came to a halt, and a resolute look appeared in his eyes. I don't need to hesitate anymore. The land of the shamans has always been filled with danger. Killing is unavoidable. If that's the case, Su Ming cast a glance at the floating Han Mountain Bell by his side, and a complicated look appeared on his face. I'll go and fulfill the requirements to awaken the seventh head. Su Ming waved his arm, and Han Mountain Bell immediately flew towards him, fused into his body, and disappeared without a trace. This bell is a priceless treasure, but why did it stay in Han Mountain City for so many years without anyone taking it away? Only Sima, Xian, and I could fight for it. There's no lack of powerful berserkers in the land of berserkers, and there are even immortals lurking in the dark. Why did they turn a blind eye to Han Mountain Bell? Could it be that they can't take it away, or perhaps don't dare to touch it? Su Ming had once wondered about this question, but even now, he still did not have the correct answer to it. He shook his head and no longer thought about it. Instead, he sat down cross-legged and began exercising his breathing to regulate his breathing. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed by. 3 days later, the unconscious old shaman beyond the mountain range opened his eyes. His eyes darted around a few times before he climbed up quietly. Once he looked around, he slowly retreated. You're leaving just like that? The moment he retreated, Su Ming's aloof voice traveled forth slowly from the mountain range. When it fell into the old man's ears, he immediately froze for a moment and forced a smile onto his face. If there's nothing else, then I won't be staying here anymore. I haven't been back for a few days, and there are still a lot of things waiting for me in the tribe. This mountain is yours, the old man quickly said. He had not seen Su Ming's figure since the beginning, and a deep sense of wariness towards this medial soul catcher had already grown within his heart. The scene before he fainted had also made him apprehensive. He had long since lost all desire to fight against Su Ming. The circular area of 30,000 feet here. Su Ming's voice traveled forth slowly, but before he could finish speaking, the old shaman started nodding his head vigorously. I know. I'll go back and tell the people in the tribe that I won't step foot into this area. If there's nothing else, then I'll take my leave first. I'm 3 votes away from being hit by the fair, rich, and beautiful girl. Monthly votes, please. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 404. As the old shaman spoke, he continued retreating until he was beside the 6 tribe members who had followed him. Only then did he kick them a few times, waking them up. Then he quickly wrapped his fist in his palm and brought them away. The 6 tribe members' faces were pale. They were filled with respect and a sense of mystery towards the mountain range where Su Ming was. As the old man charged forward, all of them were filled with lingering fear. When they were almost back to the tribe, one of the men hesitated for a moment before he spoke in a low voice. Elder, what should we do? Should we ask the statue of the ancestral shaman to attack? Heh, you only know how to play dead. What should we do? What do you think we should do? The statue of the ancestral shaman can only use its power once, and that's to intimidate he. The monkey-faced old man glared at him, then turned around and slapped the man's head. I'm telling you, you can't underestimate this medial soul catcher. He's just using his divine abilities, and he already has such power. Even if I fight with my life on the line, it'll be useless. He's a soul catcher, an outsider. He can come and go as he pleases. I don't have the confidence to kill him. If that's the case, then if I lose, then won't all of you be finished? What about the people in the tribe? Even if I win, he'll run away and find a chance to take revenge. Our tribe can't leave either. It's not worth it. The old man stroked the beard on his chin. At that moment, he no longer had the foolish look he had before. A hint of intelligence appeared briefly in his eyes. That's why I flattered him and pretended to be respectful and afraid. That's why I could avoid a fight that would have been the end of us. This is called being flexible. The old man's eyes sparkled, and he looked towards the east. By the looks of this person, he shouldn't be someone that old bird Hay he invited. Let's see. That old bird Hay, he has a bad temper. He's not as flexible as I am. Perhaps this is a good thing. The old man smiled. Then his expression turned serious again. He slapped the heads of the tribe members beside him. Go home. Remember, without my orders, don't step within 3,000, 5,000, 50,000 feet of that mountain. Once the old shaman from White Bull tribe left, Su Ming stayed in his cave abode for a few days. No one came to disturb him. He immersed himself in his training, and when he was free, he would look at the moon in the sky and practice the burning of blood. During the day, besides observing the medicinal cauldron and checking on the old berserker's condition, Su Ming also purposely used a few stone chambers to bring in a thick amount of power of the world. He also brought back some soil from the area and planted his herbs there. Besides that, Su Ming spent the rest of his time studying the Wind Berserker and Lightning Berserker's crystals of inheritance. He sensed the provenance of wind and the origin of lightning in his body and searched for a way to cast the Wind Berserker's divine ability and the Lightning Berserker's art. In this remote spot in the land of the shamans, Su Ming immersed himself in his own world, forgetting about the great war between the shamans and berserkers that was still going on. He also forgot about the catastrophe of the eastern wastelands. The only thing in his mind was to increase his level of cultivation by a large margin within these 3 years. Only then could he come into contact with the immortals that descended, and only then could he find the secret of the word fate. However, the days of peace were short-lived. 7 days later, Su Ming opened his eyes while still seated. He held the wind crystal of inheritance in his hand and lifted his head to cast a glance at the fire ape not too far away. Get rid of them. Excitement immediately appeared on the fire ape's face. Once it patted its chest, it picked up the rod and turned into a red shadow that disappeared. Before long, the fire ape returned with a satisfied look on its face and gestured at Su Ming for a long time. All right, if you run into intruders, you can make your own decisions. Don't hurt anyone during the first 3 times, but if someone comes in during the 4th time, you can kill them. Su Ming fell into a moment of pensive silence before he nodded his head and continued immersing himself in understanding wind and lightning. The fire ape immediately became even more excited and ran out in a flash. During these few days, there were always shamans who came in 2s and 3s to observe the area. Most of these people had black feathers in their hair, which was completely different from White Bull tribe. Once some of them entered the 30,000 feet area after observing the area, a fire ape would suddenly appear and swing its rod madly at them while roaring. Most of these shamans were fledgling shamans. Even if they knew some divine abilities and arts, the fire ape was too quick and would usually close in on them in the blink of an eye. All those who got close to them would be sent tumbling backwards with a bang and sent flying far away by the rod. After a few times, the number of shamans with feathers in their hair decreased, and in the end, they all disappeared as if they knew that they could not come to this place and had given up on it. When Su Ming stayed in the cave abode for half a month, on this day, 3 long arcs charged towards him from the east. The person in the lead was a middle-aged man. He was incredibly built, and his eyes shone brightly. The 2 people behind him were old men. The 3 of them descended from the sky about 100,000 feet away from the mountain range where Su Ming was. They stood on the ground and stared at the towering mountain range in the distance. Clan Chief, the border line is just 25,000 meters ahead of us. Previously, Whenever one of our clansmen crossed that line, the monkey would suddenly appear. Although it didn't kill anyone, its attacks grew more and more vicious. The last time it struck, the clansmen all had their bones and tendons broken. By the looks of it, if we go in again, it will kill us, one of the old men behind the middle-aged man said in a low voice. The other old man hesitated for a moment before he said in a low voice, "If White Bull Tribe could endure it, then it's clear that the person who occupied this place is definitely not someone to be trifled with. We saw the change in the world half a month ago very clearly. This person, I think we should wait for the patriarch to come back before we deal with him," the other old man said in a low voice. That's right. The patriarch has been away for almost a month. Before he left, he said that he would be back in about a month. The patriarch went out this time to ask Madam G for help in destroying White Bull Tribe. We can wait for a few more days. The two old men tried to persuade him, but the middle-aged man in the middle remained silent for a moment before he shook his head. The patriarch has all of Black Crane Tribe's wealth, but he doesn't have much confidence in asking Madam G from Horse Leaping Summit to help us. Fortunately, the shamans are in a state of panic right now, and since the war is still going on, we're running low on resources. That's why the patriarch decided to ask Madam G for help. But he can only take action once. This time, we have to use it to kill by Go from White Bull Tribe. But if we ask Madam G to take action twice, then we won't be able to pay the price. Even if we bring it out from White Bull Tribe's spoils of war, even if we don't have White Bull Tribe, it won't be worth it for us. We still don't know just what level of cultivation this person has. Besides, he might have caused a great commotion half a month ago, but if we don't try and find out just how powerful this person really is, then we won't be able to give an explanation when the patriarch comes back. Besides, with my power as a medial battle shaman, even if I can't win against him, it'll still be difficult for him to kill me within a short period of time. Unless he's a ladder shaman or a soul catcher with a powerful undying puppet, I can still find out just how powerful he is. Don't step into the forbidden grounds. Observe carefully from the outside. I've already made my decision. The middle-aged man spoke slowly, and fighting spirit appeared in his eyes. Cracking sounds came from his body, and his body swelled up by a fold. Like a small hill, he took huge strides forward. With each step he took, the ground would tremble faintly. A wave of murderous aura spread out from his body and turned into a wave of impact that swept through the land under his feet, stirring up a layer of dust. His speed became faster, and eventually he turned into a sonic boom that fused together with the tremors on the ground, turning into a force that charged towards the mountain range where Su Ming was. 60,000 feet, 50,000 feet, 40,000 feet, 30,000 feet. The man moved like a violent gust of wind. When he arrived at the line of 30,000 feet, he did not stop for even a single moment. He took a swift step forward, but right at the instant his foot landed, a roar traveled forth, and a fiery red shadow appeared. At the same time, a piercing sound that seemed to have caused space itself to tremble charged towards the man. It was a staff that had been swung upwards. A glint appeared in the man's eyes. He let out a cold harumph and did not dodge. He clenched his right hand into a fist and hurled it towards the incoming staff. The instant their fists collided, booming sounds reverberated in the air. The staff was bounced off, and even the fire ape within it was forced back by that one punch. The man did not have it easy either. His body froze for a brief moment, but he continued moving forward into the area of 30,000 feet. As the fire ape roared and charged towards the man once again, a murderous aura shone in the eyes of the tribe leader of Black Crane Tribe. He lifted his hands and slammed them against the ground. The ground suddenly trembled, and as the ground trembled, it seemed to affect the sky, causing ripples to appear in the sky, and the fire ape's speed froze for a moment. Almost the instant the fire ape froze, the man took a step forward and rose into the air. His right leg whipped the air with a hum, and with a powerful force, he lashed out towards the fire ape. With the fire ape's strength, it did not care about that kick. Just as it was about to lift the staff and fight against the man once again, the air before it suddenly distorted, and Su Ming appeared. He was so quick that he stirred up a violent gust of wind that swept through the area. Su Ming was dressed in a long black robe and wore a black mask. As his hair danced in the air, he hurled a punch towards the man's incoming leg. That punch contained some of the epiphany Su Ming had gained from the provenance of wind over the past few days, as well as some of his understanding towards the essence of lightning. As he hurled his punch forward, wind and thunder roared, and the momentum of it shook the sky. Wind caused Su Ming's punch to be swift and unbreakable. Lightning caused Su Ming's punch to seem as if it contained the might of heaven. The power of the berserker bones in his body erupted forth. In fact, the instant Su Ming's punch landed, the illusion of Han Mountain Bell manifested on it, as if his fist had turned into Han Mountain Bell. The instant his fist crashed into the man's leg, a loud bang rang out, and the man's right leg snapped. His face instantly turned pale, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. His body was swept away by the violent gust of wind and was flung several hundreds of feet away. He landed outside the boundary of the land, and the two old men who had followed him immediately went up to support him. Su Ming stood before the fire ape and withdrew his right hand as he spoke languidly. "Don't bother me. This is a warning. Don't force me to kill. Don't let your family die with you. Don't let your tribe disappear from the land of the shamans. It's raining every day, and it's been so many days. Peony River is a basin. From what I remember, there have been a few floods in the past. When I see the news talking about floods in various places, I feel a headache coming on. Do you know what will happen if there are no updates for the past few days? While there are still updates, I'm begging for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 405. The tribe leader of Black Crane Tribe was supported by two of his tribe members. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, and his right leg was in a terrible state. Broken bones could be seen in the bloody mess. Blood dripped on the ground, and the intense pain caused the man's face to turn pale. Large droplets of sweat rolled down his forehead. "Let's go." He gritted his teeth, and his voice sounded as if it was squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. The two old men beside him did not say a word and quickly brought him back. When they retreated several thousands of feet, they turned in a long arcs and left. Right up to the end, Su Ming only said one sentence. He watched the man leave coldly and did not stop him. After all, he was a newcomer to this place, and there were still some problems with his status. He only wanted to train in peace and understand wind and lightning so that he could increase his power. He did not want to cause trouble. It was especially so since he was an outsider. If he had too much conflict with these shamans who had deep roots in this place, even if it was just a small tribe, then it would still be troublesome. As for the shaman Crystal Vein, Su Ming might have high hopes for it, but he did not need to keep it to himself. He had tried mining these shaman crystals before, and if he did not have a special method, they would shatter the moment he touched them. He had tried using the small virescent sword before and managed to get 7 to 8 of them, but in the process he had shattered the same amount of crystals. Unless he used his hands to dig them out bit by bit without sparing a large amount of time, only then would he be able to obtain the greatest benefits. That was why Su Ming only intimidated White Bull Tribe. He did not kill them. As for Black Crane Tribe, as long as they did not go too far, Su Ming did not want to kill them easily. He might have attacked harshly, but he was also intimidating them. Only when these two tribes were wary of him would he be able to know who was stronger and who was weaker, and then there would be a possibility for him to come and talk to them. When he saw the 3 people from Black Crane Tribe leaving, Su Ming turned around and headed back to his cave abode, turning into a shadow. As for the fire ape, it was displeased. It felt that even if Su Ming had not appeared just now, it would still have been able to fight against the man. At that moment, he picked up the rod and swung it a few times at Su Ming's back, then turned into a fiery red shadow and started wandering around the area, trying to see whether there would be anyone else who would be foolish enough to barge in. In the blink of an eye, several days went by. Su Ming never left his cave abode, and no one came to disturb him. These days might be dull, but Su Ming was not impatient. He was used to having his heart calm. He might be in a foreign land, but in truth, to him, besides Dark Mountain and the Ninth Summit, almost every other place was a foreign land. He, who had long since gotten used to this sort of life, continued studying the wind crystal of inheritance. That item was the size of a fist and looked crystalline. There seemed to be wind contained within it, and when he looked at it, it looked as if wind and clouds were moving about within it. There was a strange suction force within it. Wind separation art, provenance of wind. Su Ming frowned and stared at the wind crystal of inheritance in his hands, deep in thought. If I can't fuse with the wind berserker's inheritance, then I won't be able to understand the 3 styles of wind separation. I can only use the provenance of wind and circulate it in my body to make my speed slightly faster. But the wind berserker isn't just about speed. But just what should I do to make the wind berserker's inheritance acknowledge me? Su Ming had thought of all sorts of methods during this period of time, but even the black stone fragment could not fulfill his wish. It did not respond to Su Ming's calls. Could it be that unless it's the real, true divinity of the wind berserker, then no one else will be able to obtain its inheritance? Su Ming tightened his grip around the wind crystal of inheritance. His eyes sparkled and his expression darkened. He knew all his flaws. It did not matter whether it was the power of the god of berserkers or Han Mountain Bell. They were all formed by external forces. They were not his true path of cultivation. This external force might belong to him now, but there was a high possibility that it would no longer belong to him in the future. Only his own power and divine abilities were the foundation and main focus of becoming a powerful berserker. However, Su Ming was incredibly lacking in divine abilities. Besides the berserker obliteration he created himself, he only had speed and the execution of 3 evils. This was incredibly fatal in a battle of arts. Su Ming had experienced this deeply during his journey to the land of the shamans. That was why he had increased his efforts in researching the wind crystal of inheritance so that he could strengthen the changes in his divine abilities and arts. Yet the results made Su Ming feel incredibly resigned. Yet even so, he did not give up. He continued trying to fuse with the wind crystal of inheritance. This item was like a key that could unlock the main focus of the wind berserker's inheritance. As Su Ming continued trying, there was a short mountain range located 10,000 leagues to the east of the mountain range where his cave abode was located. There was a mountain that was not too tall. That mountain was incredibly unique. It would leave a deep impression in all those who saw it. That was why the shape of the mountain looked like a crane that had spread its wings and was about to fly. Cranes did not exist in the land of the shamans. Even the berserkers did not have them. This thing belonged to the immortals and was a life form that was filled with intelligence. However, this mountain that was carved in its shape had appeared in the land of the shamans, and there was even a tribe named after the crane in the mountain. This was something that would make people think deeply about it. However, this place was located in a remote area, and Black Crane was just a small tribe. Their tribe members practically never ventured too far out, hence not many people paid attention to them. That was why the strange things about Black Crane tribe did not spread out too widely. At that moment, in a house that was carved out of mountain stone in the mountain, was the man with his right leg shattered. His eyes were shut tight, and his body was trembling slightly. His upper body was bare, and sweat was pouring down his body. There was an old woman sitting before him. Her hair was white, and there were a lot of brown spots on her face. Her hands were dried up, and she was pressing down on a man's right leg. Strange sounds tumbled out of the old woman's mouth, as if she was chanting an incantation. Behind the old woman were 5 members of Black Crane tribe sitting cross-legged at the entrance of the house. Their faces were filled with anxiety and were filled with indignation and resentment. Their hatred was not directed towards the man, but towards the spot where Su Ming's cave abode was located when they occasionally lifted their heads to look into the distance. The person who attacked you didn't have any killing intent. Your leg could be healed, but it'll take a long time. It'll take about half a year. It'll be best if you don't get injured again within half a year, or else you might be completely crippled. After a long while, the strange sound from the old woman's mouth stopped. She opened her eyes to reveal a pair of murky eyes as she spoke slowly. Once she finished speaking, the old woman stood up and walked towards the door with her arms crossed. Her footsteps were not as light as those of cultivators. They might not be heavy, but it was clear that she was immortal. The bare-chested man opened his eyes. There was fatigue on his face as he spoke in a low voice. Help the shaman doctor down. Immediately, a member of Black Crane tribe came forward and helped the old woman down. Tribe leader, I've already gathered all the warriors in the tribe. We're just waiting for your orders. Once the old woman left, an old man instantly stood up from the remaining people in the house. He had a head full of white, and he took a few steps forward to speak loudly. Tribe leader, we of Black Crane tribe cannot tolerate this. What right does this person have to occupy our shaman crystal vein? He's just one person. No matter how high his level of cultivation is, we'll just offer up our tribe blood and ask for the Crane ancestors' help. A ghastly voice came from another person's mouth. The person who spoke was a thin man, and his age could not be determined. He sat there like a skeleton. The others also spoke one after another, and their words were filled with murderous intent. Shut up. The man with the shattered right leg slapped the wooden chair he was sitting on with his right hand. That person wasn't alone. He had a fire monkey with him, and I also sensed a terrifying presence in the mountain range. It's clear that he still has some tricks up his sleeves that he hasn't used yet. Even if we don't talk about these things, the nine-headed beast that appeared during the change in the world that day is not something that Black Crane tribe can fight against. I'm only going there to test and confirm the situation so that I can give an explanation to the patriarch when he comes back. Why are you going? Are you just going to die? The man's gaze was cold as he swept his gaze past the people. We'll wait for the patriarch to come back Before the man could finish speaking, his voice suddenly came to a halt, and he lifted his head swiftly. At the same time, a piercing howl came from the sky above the mountain where the tribe was located. It reverberated through the area, and a violent gust of wind appeared out of nowhere and surrounded the mountain with moaning sounds. The man was not the only one who lifted his head. All the tribe members in the house immediately became nervous and stood up. Two people went up to help the man up, and the group quickly walked out of the house. Almost at the same time they walked out, all the tribe members from the various stone houses on the mountain walked out and knelt down together towards the sky. Welcome back, Patriarch. Their voices were like waves that moved as if they had fused with the wind. As they reverberated through the area, a long black arc charged towards them from the sky. Within that long arc was a huge crane that was nearly 500 feet tall. Its entire body was black, and its eyes were filled with fierce flames. It was flapping its wings and charging towards them. Standing on the black crane was an old man dressed in a long robe made of feathers. There were several black stripes on the old man's face, and there were wrinkles on his face, but his eyes were bright and full of vigor. There was a person sitting cross-legged beside him. That person was dressed in a red robe, and there were a large amount of insects and snakes embroidered on it. Those insects and snakes were colorful and looked terrifying. There was a bamboo hat on the person's head, and his face could not be seen clearly. However, based on the person's figure, it should be a woman. Madam G, this is my tribe. Madam G, please. The old man on the black crane swept his gaze across the land, and a smile appeared on his face. When he looked towards the woman beside him, that smile turned into respect, and he wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards her. The woman with the bamboo hat, whose face and age could not be seen clearly, gave a slight nod, and the black crane beneath the old man instantly charged towards the mountain. It closed in on them in an instant, and as it charged forward, a large amount of black smoke spread out from its body. As it charged down, more black smoke spread out, and the instant it looked as if it was about to crash into the mountain, the black crane completely turned into black smoke and dissipated. The old man and Madam G with the bamboo hat stood on the mountain, right before the man who was being supported by the others. Greetings, Madam G. When the man with his right leg shattered saw the old man and Madam G, he immediately knelt down, but because of this action, sharp pain shot through his right leg, causing his face to turn even paler. What's wrong with your leg? The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe immediately focused his gaze. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 406. Patriarch, this is... The man hesitated for a moment and cast a glance at Madame G with the bamboo hat. The woman might not have revealed her face, and neither did she say a single word. But when she stood there was a chilling air spreading out from her, causing most of the people around her to feel slightly uncomfortable. It was especially so since the people who could stand there were all the leaders and powerful warriors in their tribes. Most of them had heard of Madame G's name, and when they saw her in person, they were filled with respect. It's fine, just say it. A cold glare appeared in the eyes of the patriarch of Black Crane Tribe. The tribe leader of Black Crane Tribe struggled to stand up, and while enduring the intense pain, he slowly recounted everything from the beginning, but he did not mention the change in the world a few days ago. I'm not his opponent. Madame G, please help me. Once the man finished speaking, he struggled and bowed towards the woman. A barely noticeable glint appeared in the eyes of the old man, dressed in a robe made of black feathers. After all, he was familiar with the man and could tell that something was off, but he did not expose him. Instead, he narrowed his eyes. He knew that the man was a meticulous person and would definitely not speak without thinking. Right then, he was practically begging Madame G to help right before the old man's eyes. It was clear that he believed that even if the old man went, he would not be the outsider's opponent. Madame G, please take action in this matter. The old man gritted his teeth. If any other tribe member had said these words, he might not have believed them, but the man before him was the current tribe leader of Black Crane Tribe. There was no way the old man would not believe in his words. Is he a ladder shaman? Madame G with the bamboo hat suddenly asked. He's not a ladder shaman. I can guarantee this. The man quickly said, if your guarantee is wrong, then Black Crane Tribe will die with him. Kill one person, 2,000 shaman crystals, kill two for 1,000. Also, as we agreed before, White Bull Tribe shaman crystals and their sacred item will belong to me once your tribe, Black Crane, breaks the seal. The woman with the bamboo hat had a piercing voice, and when she spoke, the hearts of all those who heard her trembled. The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe felt his heart ache. He hesitated for a moment, but when he saw the determined look in the man's eyes, he knew that there was definitely something off about this, which was why he gritted his teeth and nodded. Thank you, Madame G. Once this is over, I will give you the remaining 2,000 shaman crystals. It's fine if you don't want to give it to me. Madame G laughed, and her laughter was just as piercing to the ears. I wouldn't dare. The old man quickly cupped his fists. I'll treat your leg for free this time. Madame G lifted her right hand and pointed at the man's right leg. With it, the antennae of a multicolored centipede that looked as if it was embroidered on the woman's robe suddenly moved a few times and started swimming about. It crawled up the woman's arm and charged towards the man's right leg. As the man shuddered, the multicolored centipede bit through his flesh and crawled inside. That pain made the man tremble. He wanted to bear with it, but in the end, he could not bear with it. He let out a shrill scream of pain and fell to the ground. As the expressions of the people from Black Crane Tribe changed drastically, cracking sounds came from the right leg of the fallen tribe leader of Black Crane Tribe. His flesh and blood rapidly healed, and after a moment, not a single injury could be seen on his right leg. However, the picture of centipede shone on his right leg. The man's face was pale. He stood up, and when he looked at Madame G, his gaze was filled with fear. He wrapped his fist in his palm and bowed towards her. Thank you, Madame G. You don't have to thank me. Your flesh and blood can provide food for my baby for 7 days. If you still don't bring out the shaman crystals after 7 days. Madame G laughed in a shrill voice. The area was silent. Only her laughter echoed in the air. Your leg has recovered now. Lead the way, Madame G said in a shrill voice after she finished laughing. Madame G, do you want to rest for a while? Tomorrow morning we'll... The patriarch of Black Crane Tribe quickly spoke up. He still had some things he wanted to talk about with the man in detail. I don't need to rest. I only killed 2 people. It won't be too late for me to rest when I come back. Madame G swung her arm and flew up in an instant. She pointed at the tribe leader of Black Crane tribe on the ground with her right leg, and the man's body leapt up against his will. He only had time to turn his head around and cast a profound glance at the patriarch before he turned into a long arc and chased after Madame G. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them disappeared into the horizon. Only when Madame G left did the patriarch of Black Crane tribe's expression turn completely dark. He turned around and swept his gaze past the tribe members around him. Tell me just what happened during this period of time. As the tribe members spoke in low whispers, and as their words fell into the patriarch's ears, the old man's expression gradually changed, especially when he heard about the change in the sky and the gigantic 9-headed beast. He sucked in a sharp breath. This is... He took a step forward, wanting to chase after the man, but he stopped for a moment and fell silent. The profound gaze the tribe leader of Black Crane had given him before he left appeared in his mind. Madame G traveled incredibly quickly in the sky. As she moved forward, 5-colored fog appeared under her feet, and it was incredibly distinct in the sky. The 5-colored fog let out a faint fragrance, and when the man from Black Crane tribe smelled it, a dazed look appeared on his face. He bit his tongue, and only then did his head clear up slightly. He remembered the legends regarding Madame G, and could not help but become even more respectful towards her. We might be in the sky, and there's a strong gust of wind blowing against us, causing the presence of my 5-colored fog to not spread out too much. But if you manage to wake up so quickly with just one whiff of it, then it looks like your willpower is pretty strong. Madame G's piercing voice came from within the 5-colored fog. Her voice might have been sharp, but contained a power that could make a person's heart tremble. When it fell into the man's ears, the dazed look appeared in his eyes once again. Almost at the instant the dazed look appeared in his eyes, the man was immediately swept up by a huge force and dragged into the 5-colored fog. Madame G, spare me. The man trembled and gritted his teeth, forcing out a quivering voice. All he could see was the 5-colored fog. There was nothing else in front of him, but he could clearly feel a soft hand touching his back, as if it was drawing a few circles on his back with a finger. A numb feeling surged through his entire body, causing the man's face to instantly turn red and his breathing to quicken. You have a strong willpower. I like this side of you. I can give you some benefits. The man shuddered. He could clearly feel a gust of hot air blowing into his right ear, and soon after, he felt as if there was a soft tongue gently licking his ear. With that one lick, a bang went off in the man's head, and he felt as if he had forgotten everything in an instant. The only thing left in his body was a primal urge. His eyes turned bloodshot, and his breathing became even rougher. A large amount of the 5-colored fog was sucked into his mouth. Giggles echoed in the fog. The 5-colored fog charged forward in the sky and tumbled about within it. As the wind blew, a large amount of fragrance spread out from it, and wherever it went, some of the birds and beasts would immediately become agitated as if they had gone mad. Madam, we're here. The burly man's body trembled. Just as his consciousness was about to completely dissipate, he fiercely bit down on his tongue. The intense pain of biting down on his tongue finally allowed him to regain a sliver of clarity. With incomparable terror, he said these words with great difficulty. What a bummer. Oh well, once I deal with that outsider, I'll give you some benefits. The lackadaisical voice was no longer shrill. As it traveled forth from the fog, Madame G walked out. She was still dressed in that long red robe, and there were colorful insects all over it. She wore a bamboo hat that hid her face, causing others to be unable to see her face clearly. When she walked out, Madame G lifted her right hand and swung it at the 5-colored fog behind her. Immediately, the man flew out from within. His entire body was flushed red, and his eyes looked as if they were about to spit fire. He was completely unconscious and let out a low growl. Once Madame G tapped the center of the man's brows with her little finger, The tribe leader of Black Crane tribe immediately shuddered and fell unconscious. His body fell to the ground, but as he fell, a wisp of five-colored fog surrounded him and slowed him down. However, once that wisp of fog surrounded the man, it turned into an illusion of a woman. Once it crawled into the man's eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, the unconscious man immediately closed his eyes and started growling like a wild beast. Madame G's breathing quickened slightly in the sky, as if it was resonating with the roars of the man from Black Crane tribe. Her face, which was hidden under the bamboo hat, smelled like orchids, and she licked her lips. With one move, she charged toward the mountain range that could be seen with the naked eye. That mountain range was where Su Ming's cave abode was located. As Madame G charged forward, the five-colored fog appeared once again under her feet and swept through the area. By the looks of it, a small part of the sky was covered by the five-colored fog. At the top of the mountain range in the cave abode, the fire ape was lying on a big rock with its eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. Occasionally, it would lift its claws and scratch its body. Suddenly, it opened its eyes and looked at the five-colored fog coming towards them from the sky. Its nose twitched, as if it had smelled something, and it immediately bared its teeth. Within the cave abode was the rod snake that Su Ming had let out but did not retrieve. It was crawling through one of the many small holes at the top of the cave abode, and at that moment, it immediately moved and a freezing glare appeared in its eyes. Underneath, it was Su Ming, who was sitting cross-legged in the hall of the gigantic cave abode. He held the wind crystal of inheritance in his right hand and pressed his left hand on the air above it. He frowned and lifted his head. Before the fire ape and rod snake, he had already noticed the five-colored fog coming toward them from the sky. Almost at the instant Su Ming lifted his head and spread his divine sense outwards, the strange rod snake's eyes turned cold, and the fire ape bared its teeth and roared. Suddenly, from the mouth of Madame G, who was surrounded by the five-colored fog, came a moan that shook the hearts of all. That voice came too suddenly, as if it was trying to capture souls. It was also incredibly clear and spread through the area, into the mountain range, and into the cave abode where Su Ming was. Recommendation votes. Our monthly votes were continuously destroyed by the tall, rich, and beautiful men. Come, counterattack. Our slogan is to defeat the tall, rich, and beautiful women and kill the tall, rich, and beautiful men. I want to return to the first place. I want to defeat the tall, rich, and beautiful women. I want to kill the tall, rich, and beautiful men. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 407. A loud bang resounded in the sky, and Madame G appeared in a dazzling manner. Ahem! Madame G appeared in the form of a Fujoshi who wanted to push Su Ming down. Everyone, are you shocked? For Su Ming's happiness, and for him not to be pushed down, he had to fight back. The people could not just watch as he did that. Throw their recommendation votes or monthly votes at her and knock her out. Recommendation votes and monthly votes, knock her out. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 408. That was a very strange sound. In Su Ming's memories, he had never heard anyone make that sort of sound before. It sounded as if someone was crying, but not crying, moaning, but not moaning. Once he heard it, it was as if someone was blowing gently into his ears, and when it landed in his heart, it felt as if it had turned into a gentle sensation, causing his heart to race against its will. In fact, even his chi started flowing much faster. What is this divine ability? Su Ming frowned. That sound was irritating, and his mind was even thrown into chaos. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he let out a cold harumph. As he let out that harumph, a powerful force burst forth from the four berserker bones in Su Ming's body and filled his entire body. It traveled down his throat and turned into a murderous voice that traveled out from the numerous holes above the cave abode, as if there was a rush of air. That voice was like thunder. This was the power of lightning contained within Su Ming's origin enchanted vessel, and it was also the epiphany he had gained from researching the essence of lightning countless times over the past few days. Almost the instant that voice traveled out of the cave abode, Su Ming stood up and walked forward with his hands behind his back. When he reappeared, he was already in the sky. He wore a black mask, and his eyes were profound. They shone with an unfathomable light as he stared coldly at the five-colored fog not too far away. There was a sweet scent all around. That scent would make anyone feel comfortable when they first smelled it, but if they smelled it for a prolonged period of time, they would feel as if they wanted to puke out all their organs. Su Ming's pupils shrank slightly as he asked languidly, "Who are you?" The five-colored fog tumbled about in the sky above the mountain range. Madame G's moans were cut off by the thunderous harumph. She stopped abruptly, and a glint appeared in her eyes, which were hidden under the bamboo hat. "What an unromantic man. I originally wanted to let you die in ecstasy, but since you don't know what's good for you, then I'll let you die while you lose your spirit." Madame G chuckled softly. When she saw Su Ming, the final hint of worry in her heart disappeared. In her eyes, as long as she did not run into a ladder shaman, then due to her level of cultivation, she would be able to stand at an absolute height among medial shamans. This was also the main reason why she did not mind the tribe leader of Black Crane Tribe, even though she could tell that he wanted to fight against her. It was also the reason why the man from Black Crane Tribe had been so enchanted by her on the way there. Madame G's voice was gentle, and there was no longer a hint of sharpness to it. It was as if there was an endless amount of charm contained in her voice. When she spoke, she lifted her hand, and the beauty of her slender fingers under the sunlight seemed to be able to make any woman at that moment lose their luster. Her fingers were long and thin. At that moment, when she lifted them, laughter that sounded like silver bells rang in the air. In an incredibly gentle manner, she pointed at Su Ming through the air. With that one tap, a layer of ripples immediately appeared on the tip of her finger. It was as if the world had turned into water at that moment, and due to the touch of her finger, ripples appeared on the surface of the water. At the same time those ripples stirred up, the sweet scent in the area instantly became thicker. She was very confident. That one tap might seem normal, but it was a divine ability she had practiced for a long time. Many of the people she had fought against in the past had their minds crumble under that one tap and turned into wild beasts controlled by their desires. They lost their reason and lost their ability to fight against her. Usually, they would be lured by her and pounce on her. As she teased them with a coquettish smile, they would eventually lose their spirit and die. She loved this sight. At that moment, there was a smile on her face under the bamboo hat, but that smile froze at that moment. Madame G was momentarily stunned. Her finger had clearly landed, but Su Ming did not show any sign of reaction. It was as if she had lost her power, and that was just a normal tap. Su Ming frowned. He could not quite understand the woman before him. The strange wails just now had made him feel slightly apprehensive. When he saw the woman's tap just now, his eyes immediately sparkled and green light appeared at the center of his brows. The pattern around him also changed according to his thoughts. Yet what made Su Ming frown was that even though that one tap had stirred up ripples in the air, he did not feel a single hint of danger. However, the moment the woman's finger landed, some strange pictures appeared in his head. Most of those pictures were blurry, and he could not see them clearly. "So you're a virgin who has no experience." No wonder. A glint appeared in Madame G's eyes, which were hidden under the bamboo hat. She licked her lips and started giggling, as if she was very happy. "You're crazy." Su Ming let out a cold harumph. With a wave of his arm, green light instantly shone, and the small virescent sword manifested before him. With a sword whistle, Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at the sword. Immediately, the provenance of wind in his body stirred up a gust of wind that was swirling around his body. That wind shot out from Su Ming's hand and fell on the small virescent sword. The sword immediately shuddered, and an illusion appeared around it to envelop the sword. That illusion was a gigantic sword that was about 10 feet long. Once it appeared, a whirlwind started howling around the sword. This was the new understanding Su Ming had gained towards the provenance of wind in his body over the past few days. If he fused it with the sword, the power of the small virescent sword would increase. Almost at the same time, Su Ming's provenance of wind turned into a whirlwind and started howling in his body. Bolts of lightning swam around his body, and thunder roared within him. A bolt of lightning shot out from his finger and charged into the gigantic sword of 10 feet. Immediately, thunder rumbled in the air, and the sword swelled up once again, turning into a gigantic sword of 30 feet. With a single thought from Su Ming, the sword charged towards Madame Ji with a howl. All of this happened in an instant. As Madame Ji giggled, the gigantic sword of 30 feet sliced down at a shocking speed. The sword sliced through the air, and the piercing howl stirred up a large amount of ripples that exploded outwards. In fact, as the sword sliced downwards, lightning sparks swam around it, stirring up thunderous booms. Virgin brother, that sword is so powerful. There was a coquettish tone to Madame G's giggles. She took a step back and lifted her right hand to draw a circle before her. The instant she drew that circle, a black glare shone within it, as if that circle could cut through space itself. A chilling presence spread out from within the circle, as if the world within the circle was different from the world outside. As the light shone, a hand shot out from within the circle. That hand was covered in black fur and was filled with a strong presence. The nails on its fingers were sharp, and once it stretched out, it went up against the unfurled sword and crashed into it in the span of a breath. Muffled sound spread out, causing waves of air to sweep out in all directions. Su Ming's sword was held up by the hand that stretched out from within the circle and stopped in midair, as if it could not pierce through that hand and harm Madame Ji, who was behind the circle. Virgin brother, how could you be so cruel? If you leave a wound on my body, then when we're in ecstasy later, won't we look bad? Madame G's coquettish voice was filled with a feeling that could make people annoyed and irritated, but when she noticed that Su Ming did not show any signs of change even after he caught the sword, a thought suddenly appeared in her heart, and she had a bad feeling. Almost at the instant, Madame Ji felt that something bad was about to happen to her. An endless amount of lightning suddenly erupted from the sword that was propped up. As it spread outwards, 7 balls of lightning shot out from the tip of the sword and surrounded the area in an instant. Explode. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. With that one word, the world rumbled. The balls of lightning that shot out from the sword exploded at the same time, turning into a large amount of lightning that shook the area. Madame Ji retreated swiftly, but the impact stirred up by the explosion of the balls of lightning charged straight towards her body. Once the balls of lightning exploded, lightning appeared in the area, and they were packed densely together, causing the circular area of 1,000 feet to look as if it had turned into a lightning hell. The light from the bolts of lightning was piercing to the eyes, and all of them showed off the might of lightning. Madame G's expression changed under the bamboo hat. At the same time she retreated, the 5-colored fog swiftly enveloped her. Once enveloped her, it swept her up, and she no longer retreated, but rose into the air. Yet the instant the 5-colored fog rose into the air, the 30 feet sword shattered inch by inch and turned into a large amount of shards. Those shards let out piercing whistles as they sliced through the air, and like sharp blades, they were swept up by a violent gust of wind and turned into a whirlwind that charged straight towards the 5-colored fog. Booming sounds rang out continuously. Su Ming had executed this series of killing moves after he had gained an epiphany towards wind and lightning over the past few days and fused them into his small sword. This was the first time he used them, and when he saw just how extraordinary they were, Su Ming's desire to absorb the wind and lightning crystal of inheritance grew even stronger. The moment the whirlwind from the shards swept into the 5-colored fog, Su Ming moved forward without batting an eyelid, and like a long arc, he caught up to the whirlwind in an instant. He clenched his right hand into a fist and hurled a punch towards the 5-colored fog through the air. That punch stirred up a strong gust of wind, but But Su Ming did not stop. He threw 5 punches in succession, and each of his punches stirred up wind. Each of his punches left a mark on the ground, as if they were overlapping with each other. In an instant, a huge gust of wind appeared out of nowhere before him and swept towards the 5-colored fog. The instant the huge gust of wind and the whirlwind from the shards he had stirred up charged into the 5-colored fog, booming sounds mixed with a furious, piercing roar traveled out from within the fog. As those booming sounds echoed in the air, a powerful impact swept out from within the fog and swiftly spread outwards. That impact crashed into Su Ming's face as if a mountain had crashed into him. Su Ming immediately retreated, and as he did so, the vortex from the shards crumbled and turned into fragmented wind that scattered away. At the same time, the huge gust of wind that had been stirred up by Su Ming's rapid punches also seemed to have crashed into a barrier and dissipated with a bang. Yet even so, once the 5-colored fog withstood Su Ming's continuous attacks, it could no longer withstand it. With a bang, it shattered to reveal the back of a strange person covered in black fur. That person's back was turned towards Su Ming, and his arms were spread out as if he was hugging something. As the fog completely scattered away, Su Ming saw a middle-aged woman in the strange person's arms, as if he was protecting her. The woman's bamboo hat had already shattered, revealing her beautiful hair, her eyes that were as clear as autumn water, and a face that would make anyone's heart pound when they saw it. It was a pity that there was a scar left behind many years ago on her face, and it ran through her entire face. That scar was dark red in color, and there was even flesh that was exposed, making it a terrifying sight. Please recommend me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 409. As the monster covered in black fur slowly let go of her, Madame G lifted her right hand from his bosom and touched the scar on her face. She stared at Su Ming with eyes that were as clear as autumn water, and hatred appeared within them. Ever since I got this scar on my face, you're the first person to see it. I'll make you wail for 7 days and 7 nights. I'll suck all your flesh and blood dry, and once all your spirit and essence become my nourishment, I'll let you die in pain. I'll make you wish you were dead. Madame G opened her mouth and let out a piercing scream. Sir, you sure talk a lot. Su Ming mocked her and took a few steps back. This woman was the first powerful enemy he ran into after he left Autumn Water Tribe. Judging by her divine ability, it was similar to a soul catcher's, but there were some differences. Besides, Su Ming's series of killing moves just now had not dealt much damage to the woman. It was especially so for the monster covered in black fur beside the woman. That person was like a puppet, and his entire body was filled with a thick life force. However, the strength of that life force was greatly different from the soul catcher's puppets Su Ming had met in the land of the berserkers. Once that life force fused with his strange body, he would give off a feeling that he was as good as dead. A strong sense of danger came from the monster's body, causing Su Ming to become even more cautious. Besides the power of the god of berserkers, he also had 2 great killing moves, but one of them required him to use the pattern of the place. He did not hesitate to open the dragon's mouth completely, causing the power of the world to surge towards him, and the pattern of the place would cause the power of the execution of 3 evils to reach a terrifying degree. However, unless absolutely necessary, Su Ming did not want to use this method. Once he did, this place would no longer be able to hide itself, and anyone would be able to tell that this was a wonderful place to train. Besides, the appearance of the puppet made Su Ming feel as if he was facing off against a ladder shaman. He could only predict the might of the execution of 3 evils. He did not have the confidence that he could kill these 2 people in succession. He also had another killing move, and that was the power of transformation once the 5th head of Han Mountain Bell awakened. However, based on his research over the past few days, he realized that once he executed this move, it could be said that once he used it, he would have to sacrifice 800 men to kill his enemy. It would be fine if he could kill his enemy, but if he could not, Then once he executed the transformation, he would lose nearly a ninth of his cultivation base. If that was the case, then it would mean that both sides would be heavily injured. If his enemy did not die, and if he still had divine abilities, then it would be hard to say whether he would survive or not. That was why Su Ming came to a decision as these two killing moves spun rapidly in his head. It was not that he could not use them, but he had to wait for the most crucial moment. When he used them, he had to kill. It's a pity I haven't finished refining the Berserker tribe's puppet, and I still can't fuse with the wind and lightning Berserker's legacy, or else I'd be able to save a lot of energy in this battle, and I'd also have a higher chance of winning. Su Ming sighed. As he retreated, his eyes burned brightly as he stared at Madame G and the strange black-haired man beside her. I'll definitely make you wish you were dead. Madame G touched the scar on her face, and as she screamed, the colorful centipedes and poisonous snakes on her red robe that looked as if they were embroidered on it started moving at the same time. The centipedes leaped up, and their colorful colors shone with an enchanting light in the dusk. The poisonous snakes hissed, and once they appeared around Madame G, they charged towards Su Ming. These poisonous creatures were not ordinary creatures. When they were in midair, they swiftly turned into hundreds, then thousands, until they covered the sky and earth densely packed together, causing all those who saw them to feel their skin crawl. As Su Ming retreated, he swept his gaze past the poisonous creatures, and when his gaze fell on the strange black-haired man and Madame G, he frowned. These poisonous creatures might have looked incredibly ferocious, but in truth, to people at their level, it was very easy to kill them. It was clear that Madame G knew this, but she still released these poisonous creatures, which made Su Ming puzzled. Just as Su Ming was feeling puzzled, a buzzing roar suddenly came from behind him. There was a chilling tone to that voice, along with an intimidating and extreme domineering tone. It was as if all the ferocious beasts had to submit to that voice. Su Ming was not unfamiliar with that voice. It belonged to his rod snake. That snake appeared before him in a flash, and as it hissed, all the poisonous creatures that pounced on him shuddered, as if they were intimidated. At the same time, Su Ming saw the strange black-haired man shudder, and his life force became chaotic. Yet before Su Ming could think about that question, a violent gust of wind howled behind him. The fire ape's eyes were bloodshot, and with a brutal and murderous aura, it swung its rod and charged towards the poisonous creatures. When it lifted its rod, it stirred up a huge gust of wind. Xiao Hong, stay back. A sharp glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he immediately spoke. He lifted his right hand, already prepared to chase away the poisonous creatures, not kill them. However, once Su Ming's voice traveled outwards, the fire ape only froze for a moment, then completely ignored Su Ming's words. With bloodshot eyes, it panted harshly, looking exactly the same as the man from Black Crane Tribe when he was in the five-colored fog. With one swing of the rod, banging sounds reverberated in the air, and a large amount of centipedes and poisonous snakes exploded as they hissed. Red and green bodily fluids shot out, and the moment those bodily fluids spread out, they immediately let out sizzling sounds, as if they were clashing against some sort of existence in the air, and in an instant they turned into five-colored fog. In the blink of an eye, with Su Ming as the center, a large amount of five-colored fog appeared at all the spots where the venomous creature's bodily fluids had spread out. At the same time, the sweet fragrance Su Ming had smelled previously in midair instantly became several times stronger. Almost the instant the five-colored fog appeared once again and the sweet fragrance grew stronger in the area, the black-haired monster beside Madame G lifted his head swiftly. A dark light and greed appeared in his eyes, and a buzzing sound came from his body. He lifted his foot and turned into a black shadow that charged towards Su Ming. At the same time, Madame G glared at Su Ming from where she was, and the resentment in her eyes grew stronger. Moans slowly tumbled out of her mouth, and as those moans echoed in the air, they appeared in the sky at a frequency that was much more intense than before. The sun gradually set in the distance, and dusk seemed to be about to disappear. The outline of a full moon appeared right in the direction where the setting sun was. Today was a full moon. The moans that sounded like the intense moans between a man and a woman tumbled out of Madame G's mouth. Delight appeared on her face, as if she was enjoying it, but the resentment in her eyes did not diminish in the slightest. Instead, it grew stronger. She caressed her body with her hands, and as she caressed her body, the buttons on her bright red robe were gradually unbuttoned, and her snow-white skin was faintly discernible. As those seductive and soul-stirring moans reverberated in the air, the man from Black Crane Tribe on the ground in the distance started foaming at his mouth. His body started twitching unconsciously, and his eyes were shut tight. However, his face was flushed red, and he breathed harshly and grunted. The dark look in the eyes of the black-haired puppet that was charging towards Su Ming became even more intense, and it became faster. Su Ming frowned. The fire ape had become even more agitated as it moaned, and it was continuously attacking the poisonous creatures, creating even more five-colored fog. Clearly, it was due to the moans disrupting its thoughts. The puppet with the black spear closed in on Su Ming in the span of a breath and opened its mouth wide. It even lifted its arms, and by the looks of it, it looked as if it wanted to hug Su Ming. Su Ming's eyes sparkled, and a layer of blue light shone around his body. A blue armor surrounded him in a barely discernible manner. This armor was different from the battle armor of Bone Sacrifice. If he did not suspect it, it would be difficult for him to recognize it at first glance. The moment the armor appeared, Su Ming took a few quick steps back before he charged forward. The wind in his body started spinning, causing his speed to increase exponentially in an instant. As he left behind a trail of afterimages, Su Ming had already arrived before the black-haired strange man and hurled his fist forward. A loud bang spread out, and from the distance, it looked as if most of the black-haired monster's body had been crushed by Su Ming's punch, and he exploded into a large amount of black fog. What remained before Su Ming was a thin and shriveled body. That body tumbled backwards with its arms still spread out. The black fog that scattered away was like the flesh and blood that had been torn apart. However, Su Ming's pupils shrank. He could clearly see that his fist had not hit the black-haired monster. Instead, when it was about 7 inches away from the monster's body had automatically split apart. As if it had disintegrated, it turned into a large amount of black beetles. Each of them was the size of a fingernail, and as they spread out densely, they looked like black fog from the distance. The only thing that did not disintegrate was the thin and shriveled body before him. Its eyes were closed, and a rotting stench spread out from its body. Clearly, it was a corpse, and it had been dead for an unknown number of years. The instant Su Ming's pupils shrank, the shriveled corpse suddenly opened its eyes. It was a pair of gray eyes, and even its pupils were gray. It stared at Su Ming, opened its mouth, and revealed its sharp teeth before pouncing on him. The instant it pounced on him, the black beetles that had spread out in the area charged towards Su Ming with a buzzing sound. From the distance, it was a terrifying sight to behold. The black fog before Su Ming was about to devour him, and the corpse with the gray eyes was already less than 5 feet away from Su Ming at an incredible speed. In the distance, Madame G's moans became even more intense. Half of her clothes had already been taken off, revealing her snow-white skin that exuded a lustful air. As her clothes fell off one by one, a scar could be seen faintly on her right chest. That scar was not long, but looked as if it had been left behind by someone's claws. Don't let him die so easily, my husband, Jianhai. Tear off his skin and plant the insect eggs in him. Make him scream in pain just like you did in the past. As he screamed, I'll suck all his essence dry. You have to watch by the side, Madame G said as she moaned, and the meaning contained within her words was enough to make anyone's skin crawl even though it was not cold. A rotten stench came crashing into Su Ming's face. The armor on his body instantly became complete, and with a grim expression on his face, he lifted his right hand. The moment the shriveled corpse pounced on him, Su Ming formed a seal with his right hand and bent his index finger to touch his thumb. Immediately, the shadow of Han Mountain Bell after it had shrunk down appeared on his palm. It was soon followed by Su Ming lifting 3 of his fingers and pushing them downwards. Han Mountain Bell became even more corporeal. Finally, he clenched his fist and spread it open, pressing down on the corpse. When I saw everyone's words in the book review section, I did indeed have to fight for the first place. All right, I'll fight for the first place this month. I'll fight for the first place. This month, I won't lose to 80 chapters. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 410. The book was released in February, and it was published in April. It had been half a year since the new year, and the number of words begging for demons had reached 2 million. The results were acceptable, and there was a steady increase. There were posts in the book review section asking Jin to fight for first place. Jin saw it. Do you guys want first place? Do you guys really want first place? I want it. If you guys want it too, then why don't Jin go crazy for once? Why don't you fight for it? Why don't you let everyone's blood boil for once? Fight for first place. I'll do my best to fight for first place and give it to my 100,000 demon army as a gift. I'll fight for first place. Even if I have to bleed, I'll roar from the top of the mountain. I'll fight for first place. I'll draw my sword. No matter if it's a tall, rich, handsome, or beautiful person, or even if there are other tall, rich, and handsome people charging at me, I'll draw my sword. It'll start this Friday, and it'll explode for 3 consecutive days. It'll be the same every week. I'll fight for first place for the demon army. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 411. Ji Yunhai is the strongest soul catcher in the southern shaman inlands. He is known as the ladder soul catcher who has the highest chance of becoming an end shaman. It's a pity that this person has gone missing for many years, or else he would have been able to fight in this battle. With his unique soul catcher skills, he is skilled in large-scale slaughter. There were countless tents in the land of the shamans 70,000 leagues away from Sky Mist City, and no one could see the end of them. There were more than 100,000 shamans in this place, and every single day, there would be a large number of warriors from other shaman tribes joining them from behind, continuously growing their numbers. At that moment, there was a tall mountain beside the sea of tents that stretched to the point where the end could not be seen. If a person stood at the top of the mountain, they would be able to see the outline of Sky Mist City in the distance. There was a woman standing at the top of the mountain. She had long hair, an elegant look on her face, and a profound look in her eyes. She possessed a temperament that was different from the shamans. That temperament made her seem like she was floating in the air, and her calmness seemed to be able to infect the people around her, causing all those who stood beside her to feel calm. Over the years, not many powerful shamans have appeared among the shamans in inlands. As time passed, there are only 8 of them left, and 3 of them have not joined the immortals. There were around a dozen shamans standing beside the woman. There were men and women among them. Besides 3 of them who were middle-aged, the others were all old. The one who spoke at that moment was an old man with white hair. He held a staff with a crocodile's head in his hand, and he stared at Sky Mist City as he spoke in a low voice. Speaking of this Ji Yunhai, he was originally a member of the Conferred Heaven tribe. Later on, when the Conferred Heaven tribe was exterminated, he survived. I don't know what kind of fortuitous encounter he encountered, but the soul devourer he cultivates is different from others. He is proficient in the art of poisonous insects and has even researched the 9-colored poison mist, especially that natal Conferred Heaven insect, which he has refined to the point of being undying and indestructible. If he was here and by your side, not only would he be able to kill the berserkers, he could also use his Heaven Follower insect to deliver your orders without the berserkers interfering. With the insect, he could gather the will of the entire shaman army. This unique soul catcher is very rare, but it's a pity. The last time I heard about him was around a dozen years ago. I heard that he got to know a woman and became her partner, and after that, there was no news of him." The old man shook his head and continued talking about the next person, introducing all the outstanding shamans he knew to the long-haired woman. It was difficult for all the people in the place, including the woman, to know that at that moment, the Jian Hai they spoke of was pouncing on Su Ming with gray eyes and an aura of death surrounding his entire body, which was located in a remote land in the land of the shamans far away from them. The countless black beetles outside his body were the heaven follower insects. Every single one of them was personally refined by Jian Hai, and they were undying and indestructible. However, even if it was the old man who spoke of Jian Hai with a regretful tone on the mountain peak outside Heavenly Mist City, if he were to stand here and see Jian Hai with his own eyes, it would be very difficult for him to recognize that this withered, gray-eyed monster was Jian Hai. Not only had his appearance changed drastically, even his power had become much weaker. He did not look like a ladder shaman, but a medial shaman. The only thing that did not change was the presence that once belonged to a powerful berserker on his body. It was just like the soul catcher's path, undying and indestructible, or perhaps it was an unwillingness to admit defeat. It was filled with an endless amount of resentment and hate, and it did not want to disappear. As Ji Yun Hai closed in, a chilling glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lifted his right hand, and as he changed the seals 3 times, the shadow of Han Mountain Bell appeared on his palm as if it had gained physical form, and he pressed his palm against the pouncing Ji Yun Hai. The spot he pressed against was Ji Yun Hai's chest. With that one push, Su Ming immediately felt a huge force surging towards him from his hand, and in the blink of an eye, it spread through his entire body, causing him to taste a sweet taste in his mouth before he coughed out a mouthful of blood. He staggered backwards, and with each step he took, violent ripples would appear in the air. When he was several hundreds of feet away, Su Ming's robes on his right arm exploded with a bang, revealing the bulging veins on his arm. Some of them even exploded as they swelled up rapidly. Blood mist gushed out, causing Su Ming's face to instantly turn pale. At the same time, the sea of insects swiftly charged towards Su Ming. Buzzing sounds traveled through the air, causing all those who heard it to feel their skin crawl. Su Ming might be in a pathetic state, but Ji Yun Hai's body also shuddered, and the mark of Han Mountain Bell immediately appeared on the spot where Su Ming had pressed down on his chest. That mark swiftly covered Ji Yun Hai's entire body like a tidal wave, and in the blink of an eye, an illusion of Han Mountain Bell had also appeared around Ji Yun Hai's body. Seal! Su Ming let out a low shout. If Ji Yun Hai still had intelligence and knew when to retreat, then Su Ming knew that it would be incredibly difficult for him to seal him. However, this person was just a puppet that could not think and could only move according to his control. His reaction was naturally not as good as a living person's, especially when Su Ming had been so close to Han Mountain Bell just now that he had finally sealed this person with Han Mountain Bell, even at the risk of injuring himself. Once Su Ming uttered the word seal, the illusion of Han Mountain Bell around Ji Yun Hai, who was still pouncing towards him, immediately gained physical form. Once it turned into a complete Han Mountain Bell, it enveloped Ji Yun Hai within it. Buzzing sounds reverberated in the air. Han Mountain Bell floated in the sky, and sounds of crashing continuously came from within, as if Ji Yun Hai was continuously ramming against it. The instant Ji Yun Hai was sealed by Han Mountain Bell, the endless amount of heaven follower insects and the black insect fog around him froze for a moment before they pounced on Su Ming. Break! Su Ming had already awakened 6 heads of Han Mountain Bell. Besides gaining control over its new power, he had also gained a greater understanding towards the divine abilities that belonged to the bell previously. The break that came after the seal was the change that Su Ming had come to understand over the past few days. Once he uttered the word break, Han Mountain Bell immediately let out bell chimes and spread out. Under those bell chimes, all of Ji Yun Hai's presence disappeared without a trace in an instant. If that was all, then it would not be much different from being sealed. However, at that moment, besides Ji Yunhai's presence disappearing, there was also a faint connection between him and the heaven follower insects that was similar to blood. It was not a connection that could be controlled by Ji Yunhai's presence. Almost the instant Han Mountain Bell uttered the word break, and the bell chimes rang in the air, the black sea of insects that were pouncing on Su Ming froze once again. Soon after, as if they had lost their master and consciousness, they fell to the ground before Su Ming. Cold sweat broke out on Su Ming's forehead. The battle against Ji Yunhai might have been short, but it had been incredibly dangerous. This sea of insects had brought great danger to Su Ming, and there was also Ji Yunhai himself. If he had not died and was still alive, then Su Ming would definitely not be his opponent. Besides, this person might have died a long time ago and turned into a puppet, but if Su Ming wanted to kill him, then unless he used a powerful killing move, he could only seal him. Su Ming's expression was dark. The instant the sea of insects fell to the ground, he looked towards Madame Ji, but right at the moment he looked at her, the last piece of Madame Ji's robe fell off not too far away, revealing a curvaceous body. If he did not look at the scar the size of a fist on the right side of her chest and the red scar on her face, then this would be a body that seemed to have been created by the heavens and earth. She looked at Su Ming, lifted her hands, and once she clasped them above her head, she started dancing. In midair, she started performing a primitive dance before Su Ming. That dance was not pleasing to the eye, but if anyone looked at it a few more times, they would be unable to help themselves but feel their mouths go dry, their hearts pound, their blood flow quicken, and their imaginations run wild. Because while that dance might be primitive, every single time that petite body moved, it would seem as if it was to stir up the primal desires of others. As Madame Ji danced, illusions of women appeared in the air around her. They wore faintly discernible gauze dresses, and once they appeared, they would start dancing as well. In the blink of an eye, more illusions of women appeared, and they filled the area around Su Ming. In fact, some of them were so close to Su Ming that they looked as if there was no distance between them. When they moved before his eyes, there would be a faint fragrance around them. If that was all there was to it, perhaps Su Ming would not have been affected too much, but when the women who manifested from space surrounded him, their petite bodies were filled with temptation, luring his most primal desires, and their appearances instantly changed. Tian Lanmeng was dressed in a white gauze dress, and she walked past Su Ming with a smile, Bai Su and Bai Ling. These two women, who were practically identical in appearance, were dancing as they danced in a manner that made people's hearts race. Han Song-zi, Han Fei-zi, and the other people appeared. Their seductive bodies were faintly discernible, and each of them was different. The seduction that bloomed around Su Ming caused his breathing to become noticeably heavier. Even the sacred lady of Autumn Sea tribe, Wan Xiao, was dressed in a purple gauze dress. She walked towards Su Ming with a beautiful posture and footsteps from the distance. As he looked at these familiar faces, a conflicted look appeared on Su Ming's face. A cloudy look appeared in his eyes, and they were no longer clear. At the same time, he saw Wan Xiao turning into Madame Ji and walking towards him with a seductive air. Su Ming's eyes looked as if they had been lit up by fire, but there was a dull look in them. Along with that, his breathing became increasingly heavier, and he started growling in a seemingly unconscious manner. At that moment, Su Ming did not look any different from Xiao Hong. They were practically the exact same, but there seemed to be flames of desire burning fiercely in his dull eyes, and they had turned into a shade of crimson. Hot air could be heard from Su Ming's heavy breathing. Sweat dripped down from his mask, and in an instant he pounced on Madame Ji, who was walking towards him. Giggles tumbled out of Madame Ji's mouth. A smug look appeared on her face, and the venom in her eyes turned into a cruel killing intent. That one move of hers could stir up the evil desires in a person's heart. Even Ji Yunhai's heart and soul would be stirred up if he was careless. That was why Madame Ji did not suspect Su Ming's actions. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 412. I'll definitely make you wail for 7 days and 7 nights before you die. Then I'll suck out all the essence in your body and turn you into a dried-up corpse. With a single move, Madame G charged toward Su Ming. The moment she closed in, all the familiar faces in Su Ming's eyes twisted, and they swiftly charged towards him from all directions. At the same time, the five-colored fog in the world started surging and sweeping through the area before rapidly gathering towards Su Ming. Madame G was the fastest. When she was less than 5 feet away from Su Ming, she lifted her right hand, and a black hairpin appeared in her hand. She was just about to stab it into the center of Su Ming's brows. A hint of derision appeared in Su Ming's cloudy eyes, and as that derision appeared, a clear look appeared in his eyes. At that moment, there was not a hint of lust on his face. Everything that had happened just now had clearly been intentional, and there was only one goal in his actions: to lure Madame G closer and kill her in one go. Madame G had a lot of tricks up her sleeves, and Su Ming was worried that she still had other killing moves. That was why he used himself as bait to lure her closer. The instant she saw the derision in Su Ming's eyes, Madame G's expression changed drastically. Her heart let out a thump against her chest, and she wanted to retreat, but it was already too late. Su Ming took a swift step forward, and he was so quick that he arrived before Madame G in the blink of an eye. He lifted his left hand and grabbed Madame G's right hand, which was holding the hairpin. At the same time, he rammed his body into Madame G's chest. Madame G shuddered, and cracking sounds came from within her. She tumbled backwards and blood trickled out of the corners of her mouth. Shock and astonishment appeared on her face, along with a hint of terror. However, before she could retreat too far away, Su Ming activated his terrifying speed and caught up to her once again. With a sweep of his foot, he kicked Madame G's head. With a bang, Madame G coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. Her head was twisted and her body was flung out, but Su Ming only frowned. He did not sense any aura of death from the woman's body. Instead, her life force had become even more exuberant. With a cold harumph, Su Ming did not stop. He took a step forward and caught up to her once again. He lifted his right hand and clenched his fist in the air. Instantly, lightning swam in the sky. The instant Su Ming unfurled his right hand, bolts of lightning gathered together to turn into a ball of lightning. Thunder rumbled in the air. The ball of lightning let out a brilliant light in Su Ming's hand, and he pushed it into the center of Madame G's brows. A loud bang reverberated in the air, and Madame G let out a shrill scream of pain, but the slaughter had not ended. Su Ming closed in once again and lifted his left hand. Immediately, a whirlwind surrounded him, and once it closed in on Madame G, the whirlwind started spinning rapidly. Flesh and blood flew into the air and spilled everywhere. Madame G quickly retreated. She was injured repeatedly, and just as she was about to fight back, Su Ming closed in on her and formed a seal with his right hand, pointing towards the sky. Immediately, a bell chime that shook the hearts of people suddenly came from Han Mountain Bell in the distance. The bell chime came too suddenly, and when it fell into Madame G's ears, the woman could not help but slow down in her attempts to fight back. The instant her mind trembled because of the bell chime, green light shone before Su Ming, and the small virescent sword shot out. Under the control of Su Ming's divine sense, it charged towards Madame G's head. In an instant, a large amount of blood gushed out. As the small sword swept through the air, a head flew into the air. It was nighttime at that moment, and the full moon hung high in the sky. As the head flew up, blood spilled everywhere. However, Su Ming did not relax, just because Madame G's head flew into the air. Instead, as the head flew out, the sense of danger instantly grew stronger. The instant his pupil shrank, he saw the headless Madame G lifting her right hand and grabbing the head that had been separated from her body. Madness and hatred appeared in the head's eyes as it glared at Su Ming and let out a piercing roar. That roar turned into a wave of sound that stirred up ripples in the air. The strength of that wave of sound was like a needle stabbing into Su Ming's ears, causing them to ring. He immediately retreated, and, at the same time, he drew a few circles in the air before him with his right hand. With each circle he drew, the power of that wave of sound would decrease by a large margin. Each circle was a whirlwind, and after a few circles, when Su Ming was 300-something feet away, blood flowed out of his ears. Could it be that all soul catchers will refine themselves to become undying? Su Ming's heart sank. He was not surprised that Madame Ji did not die. It was the same for the young soul catcher he met in the past. Spirit plunder would have miraculous effects on those with undying bodies, but Madame Ji's strength was different from the young soul catchers. It was as if she was not just a soul catcher. As Su Ming retreated, he lifted his right hand and seized the air in the direction of the mountain range behind him. Immediately, the 3 spirit plunders floating above the old berserker's head, which were frozen in his cave abode, turned into 3 long arcs of dark light that flew out of the cave abode and charged towards Su Ming's right hand. Yet the instant Su Ming summoned the spirit plunder, Madame Ji brought her head back and placed it on her neck. Her flesh and blood rapidly grew back, and in the blink of an eye, they fused together. At the same time, Madame Ji lifted her right hand, and a drop of blood appeared on her palm. That blood did not belong to her, but to Su Ming. It was a drop of blood she had secretly taken from the blood he had coughed out previously. At that moment, she held that drop of blood in a tight grip and ignored the 3 pearls that were rapidly closing in on Su Ming, causing her to feel pressured. She narrowed her eyes into slits. The shaman's Lord of Nine Li, during the 9th dawn after you were born, is a wisp of your companion's power that you abandoned. This power has turned into the barren een of the world, and has fused into the paths of all manner of living. All spirits will live, and some will die. If they exist, then they will disappear. If they have blessings, then there will be curses. With my flesh and blood, with my life force, I offer up this barren een of the world. With this person's blood as a guide, I will seize this person's flesh and life force. Curse! Madame Ji's body rapidly withered away, and in the blink of an eye, she turned into a corpse. She also aged in an instant. Her beautiful face turned dull, and her curvaceous body became even uglier. With a bang in her right hand, the drop of blood that belonged to Su Ming exploded and turned into blood mist that was sucked into Madame Ji's body through her eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Killing intent appeared in Madame Ji's eyes. The curse was an incredibly powerful art among soul catchers. In fact, this art did not even belong to the Candle Dragon. Instead, it had been researched by the shamans who practiced soul catchers for several generations, and through some unique methods, they had come up with this powerful killing move together with those who practiced spirit mediums and thought soothsayers. In fact, there were even rumors that this art was not created by the shaman tribe in the beginning. Instead, it was left behind from a long time ago. There were some pictures drawn on some items that were left behind, and after some time, it was slowly developed into this art. This art could be cast by spirit mediums and thought soothsayers, but only when used by soul catchers had the strangest and most unfathomable power. However, not everyone could cast it. Besides, the incantation for this art was a top secret in the shaman tribe. Only the big tribes had records of it, and most of them were incomplete. The complete curse only existed in the god of Shaman's temple. Even with Ji Yunhai's status, he could not obtain the complete curse. He could only obtain an incomplete one. However, he had coincidentally obtained an item that was left behind from a long time ago. With his talent, he had managed to figure out the curse, but because of it, he had also planted a seed of disaster. As for Madame Ji's curse, it came from her husband, Ji Yunhai. It was a pity that with her potential, she could only master the basics of it. She could only offer the soul of Nine Li, the ancestor of the shaman tribe. If it was Ji Yunhai, then he could offer a powerful existence during the time when the shamans and berserkers did not exist in exchange for terrifying power. The instant the blood mist was sucked away by Madame Ji, Su Ming's body started trembling. A gigantic, blood-red vortex suddenly appeared in the air above him. That vortex appeared out of nowhere, and in the blink of an eye, it started spinning rapidly. As it spun, Su Ming immediately noticed that his body had been frozen and was limited to an area of 10 feet. He could not leave. White mist spread out from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and was rapidly absorbed by the vortex. His body also started withering slowly. His hair started turning gray from the roots. His flesh, his life force, his everything was continuously sucked away by the vortex at that moment. That was not all. Su Ming also noticed that his organs were also deteriorating as if they were about to rot. In fact, even the breath he exhaled had a rotting quality to it. Madame G's face was dark as she stood outside the vortex. Casting this art was also a huge burden on her. She had already made her decision. Once she killed Su Ming, she would definitely go back and destroy Black Crane Tribe. Enjoy your death. Watch your flesh and blood wither away. Watch your life fade away bit by bit. Watch yourself turn into a corpse. This is the result of offending me. Madame G's face was filled with malice, and her voice was piercing. She looked hideous and dried up like bones. Noisy, a freezing glare appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He might have been limited to an area of only 10 feet, but he was not afraid. He had a way to leave this place. In truth, he only needed to use up the power of the god of berserkers once, and he would be able to walk out of this place. However, he did not do so. The power of the curse had piqued Su Ming's interest. He lifted his head, and as his life force and his flesh and blood flowed away, his eyes sparkled as he stared at the vortex. He ignored Madame G and sat down cross-legged to study it. When she saw Su Ming's arrogant actions, Madame G laughed coldly, and anger burned even deeper in her heart. Time passed by. 7 breaths later, Su Ming's body had already withered away. His eyes sparkled, and he could vaguely make out something from the vortex, but he was mostly puzzled. At that moment, the moon was hanging high in the sky. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he lifted his right index finger. Once he bit down on it, he rubbed it against his left eye, then his right eye. Burning of blood. He used the power of burning of blood in exchange for his life force, so that he could have more time to study the curse. Su Ming was incredibly interested in this strange spell that he had used up until now. This was not the first time he had heard about the curse. In truth, he had heard about this mysterious spell among the shamans from Wu Duo. There were very few people who could master it, but this was the first time he had seen it. There was no way he would give up on this chance. Almost the instant Su Ming used the burning of blood, a man with long hair, long white robes, and an air of elegance, who looked somewhat similar to Su Ming, was reaping a shaman's life with a cruel smile on his lips in the midst of the small-scale battle between the shamans and berserkers outside Sky Mist City. Big Brother Yufeng, once we return to the city after this battle, your rank should be among the top 60, right? There were some berserkers beside the man, and as they fought against each other, they laughed and spoke. I'm not thinking about this. It doesn't matter to me what my rank is. What I care about is the battle between us berserkers. Yufeng shook his head, and there was a hint of worry on his face. His words and expression immediately made the people around him feel respect for him. Yet at that moment, Yufeng suddenly shuddered, and for some reason, a sense of danger rose in his heart. Just as he was about to check his surroundings, his expression suddenly changed, and he coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. In an instant, he looked as if he had aged by 10 years. Su Ming. It's Su Ming. He's the one casting the spell. Disbelief appeared in Yufeng's eyes, and he was screaming madly in his heart. The monthly updates will not be less than 80 chapters, and it will explode on Friday, and it will be the same every week. I won't ask for too many votes for the next few days. I only ask for stability, and when it explodes, I'll try to get first place. I ask for votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 413. That Yufeng was Yufeng, who had hidden himself after Su Ming left the battlefield outside Sky Mist City. This person had devoured a berserker and turned into him. He had been living comfortably in Sky Mist City during this period of time, and his ambition had become even more savage. He even intended to devour Su Ming once he became stronger and turn into Su Ming so that he could roam the world. The reason why he had such ambitions was because he had inherited a shred of memories when he fused with the wings of the moon. He did not tell Su Ming about this, but chose to train in secret. Over the past few days, besides going to the battlefield to obtain war points, he spent all his time sealing the wings of the moon in his body, causing them to become part of Yifeng's body so that Su Ming could no longer use them. He believed that he had sealed up most of this through some of the legacies in his memories, and he had become even more confident. However, he did not expect that a large amount of his life force would suddenly flow out of his body in this battlefield. The loss of this life force caused Yifeng to be shocked, and there was also fear in his heart. He did not need to think about it in detail to instantly guess that Su Ming was casting an art. Damn it, I've already sealed the wings of the moon in my body. How can Su Ming cast an art out of thin air? Yifeng's face was pale. He staggered and took a few steps back on the battlefield. His companions around him moved forward and protected him with surprised looks on their faces. At the same time, they started asking questions. It's fine. I injured my body when I was training last night. I was going to heal myself today, but when I remembered that I had a fight, I suppressed my injuries. That's why my injuries acted up just now. Thank you, everyone. I hope that you can protect me for a while. Once I suppress my injuries, I'll be fine. Yifeng spoke in a low voice and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards the crowd. Once the people around him nodded, he sat down without any hesitation and tapped a few spots on his body with his hands. Yet at that moment, Yifeng's expression changed drastically once again. His face started withering in a bizarre manner once again. Sharp pain spread through his entire body, including his soul. Yifeng could not help but let out a pain cry. His face caved in and his body rapidly withered away. In the blink of an eye, he looked like a mummy. This strange change caused the berserkers around him to feel their hearts tremble in fear. Terror appeared in Yifeng's eyes. He could clearly feel his life force and fleshly essence being forcefully sucked away by some sort of power above him. However, when he raised his head to look at the sky above him was completely calm. In fact, this loss of flesh and blood essence and life force had nothing to do with the wings of the moon. It didn't matter whether he sealed them or not. It must be Su Ming. Just what method did he use? Terror rose in Yifeng's heart. He suddenly realized that even if Su Ming was far away from him, even if he had escaped from Su Ming's sight, when Su Ming wanted to punish him, it did not matter if he was at the ends of the earth, Yifeng would still be terrified. However, what Yifeng did not expect was that Su Ming did not cast an art solely on him. In fact, he did not even cast an art. At that moment, Su Ming's eyes were shining brightly as he stared at the vortex in the sky. Every single time the vortex spun, Su Ming's expression would occasionally change to one of astonishment, then to one of ecstasy, but soon, confusion would appear on his face, and eventually, his expression would change. Madame Ji was standing not too far away. Her body was only skin and bones, and she looked incredibly ugly. She was glaring at Su Ming, and disdain as well as malice appeared in her eyes. She had naturally seen through Su Ming's actions, but she did not believe that he could truly see through the curse. Yet even so, Madame Ji was still uncertain as to how Su Ming could last for such a long period of time under the curse. In her eyes, Su Ming's body was thin, but he was still far from being dried up. It was as if ever since he cast the burning of blood and the moon in the sky let out a strange red light. The powerful power of the curse seemed to have been shifted away by Su Ming. It was as if there was an incredibly unlucky person who had taken Su Ming's place and endured the power of the curse. Su Ming did not want to let Yifeng take his place. He had cast the burning of blood because he wanted to use this art to slow down the loss of his life force and the essence of his flesh and blood. However, he did not expect that once he cast the art, he would sense a power belonging to the Fire Berserker tribe in the direction of the land of Berserkers beyond Sky Mist City. The moment he noticed that power, the power of the curse that had gathered on Su Ming's body moved away in a strange manner, and with Su Ming as the medium, it descended on He Feng's body. I'm the lord of the Fire Berserker tribe. That is why when I cast the burning of blood, the strange power of the curse will be shared by my people. When they can no longer bear the burden, then I will continue. Now, it seems that besides me, the only other Fire Berserker in the world are the Fire Berserker I created, He Feng. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he gained a better understanding towards the power of the curse. He looked at the vortex in the sky, and his eyes sparkled. A hint of understanding appeared in his head, but this understanding was still insignificant when it came to mastering the curse. The curse curses those who share the same origin. He Feng is the Fire Berserker I created. That's why he could be said to share the same origin as me. That's why he is within the range of the curse. But besides sharing the same origin, does this curse also have a blood connection? Uncertainty appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He remembered that when Wu Duo told him about the mysterious curse in the land of the shamans, he did not mention the power of those who shared the same origin, even though it seemed to have something to do with blood. He once spoke of shaman tribe where a powerful soul catcher cursed a person, and all those who were related to that person by blood all died. In the end, due to the blood connection between that person and the tribe, most of the people in that tribe died. If what Wu Duo said is true, then the curse does indeed have a blood connection, but its power isn't at its peak, or else if there's such an almighty in the shaman tribe, then he could definitely curse the entire Berserker tribe, so that all the Berserkers would die, or so that the Berserkers would never be able to break through a certain realm. Su Ming's eyes went wide. This was originally a guess that had appeared in his mind after he saw the power of the curse and gained a hint of epiphany, but the answer he obtained from these guesses caused his heart to tremble. Ever since the third god of Berserkers died, all the members of the Berserker tribe stopped at the Berserker soul realm, and it was difficult for them to break through. They said that only when the fourth god of Berserkers appeared would the entire Berserker tribe be able to continue training after the Berserker soul realm. Could this be? Perhaps I was overthinking it. Su Ming's breathing quickened, and he only managed to recover after a long while. Just as Su Ming was feeling shocked and gaining a hint of understanding, He Feng's shrill screams of pain traveled through the area outside Sky Mist City. His body had already withered to the point that he no longer looked like a human, and a large amount of rotting flesh had also appeared on his body. The foul stench from the rotting flesh caused shock to appear on the faces of the people around him. He Feng could clearly feel that the essence of his flesh and blood was about to run out. His life force was also rapidly flowing away. At that moment, his consciousness was clouded, and the shadow of death enveloped his heart once again, turning it into great terror. Master, I was wrong. I was really wrong this time. He Feng's shrill screams of pain were mixed with his pleading voice. When his companions around him heard it, especially when they heard the word master, they were all stunned. At the instant they were stunned, He Feng's body suddenly shuddered violently and turned into a puddle of blood. Even his bones had melted away. However, he had devoured this body, and even though it had disappeared, He Feng's soul was still around. It was a black shadow that floated out of the puddle of blood. In a flash, that black shadow appeared beside a young berserker and opened its mouth to devour him. Before the people around him could react to what was happening, the young berserker let out a scream of pain, and his entire body was covered by that black shadow. Big brother Yufeng? He's not Yufeng. He's the shaman who killed Yufeng. Kill him. The other berserkers around them swiftly attacked in shock, but when their divine abilities closed in on the young berserker who was enveloped by He Feng, the black shadow disappeared, and the young berserker's face was revealed. It was a wizened face in the sky above Su Ming's cave abode in the land of the shamans. The vortex started dispersing, as if it could no longer be maintained. Madame Ji was already dumbfounded by the sight. She stared at Su Ming, who had only become slightly thinner, with a dumbfounded expression, almost unable to believe her own eyes. She knew just how powerful the curse was. If a latter shaman was accidentally cursed, then even if he did not die, a large amount of his life force would definitely disappear. Yet to her eyes, Su Ming was practically unscathed, and the loss of his life force was completely negligible. This strange sight made Madame G suck in a sharp breath. Her face instantly turned pale, but she did not retreat. Instead, madness appeared in her eyes. She knew that the curse would only last for about 10 breaths. Once that was over, it would disappear, and Su Ming would be able to walk out of the area of 10 feet. I refuse to believe that I won't be able to kill you today. Once I kill you, I'll turn you into a puppet and turn you into my Dharma protector along with Ji Yunhai. With your divine abilities and strange abilities, you must be quite famous in the shaman tribe. But today, you will definitely die. The killing intent in Madame G's eyes grew stronger. She took a few steps back, spread her arms wide, and sucked in a deep breath. With that one breath, violent gusts of wind howled around her, and at the same time a large amount of wind was sucked into Madame G's mouth. A tattoo suddenly appeared on her ugly face. That tattoo was a ferocious-looking head. Judging by the size of the picture on the head, that was definitely not the head of an adult, but that of a baby. The 10 breaths passed by one, and in the end, Su Ming gave up on continuing researching the curse. The research just now had allowed him to gain a hint of epiphany, but if he wanted to obtain it completely, then he would have to think of a way to get it from Madame G. His expression was grave. This Madame G was not a ladder shaman, but she was one of the strongest medial shamans Su Ming had ever met, and she had an endless amount of tricks up her sleeves. Yet the more it was so, the more Su Ming put away the thought of immediately using the power of the god of berserkers and his other killing moves. He had not fought against the shamans many times, and large-scale battles did not count. Su Ming lacked experience in this sort of battle between two people using arts. He did not want to miss this chance when he ran into a person who was skilled in a variety of arts. I'll give everyone a surprise today. It should be considered a surprise, right? Let's ask for monthly votes and recommendation votes first. It's not easy to fight for the first place of each month. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Start Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 414. Madame G's face was ferocious, causing the tattoo on her face to become even more terrifying. The baby's eyes were dark, causing Madame G to look as if she had 4 eyes on her face, and she was glaring at Su Ming. At the same time, Madame G lifted her hands, and her fingers started moving in a strange manner before her. Very soon, distorted ripples appeared before her, and as those ripples spread out in all directions, Madame G let out a piercing howl. Ghost pregnant shaman tribe, the living spirit that has been sacrificed for generations. With the body of the only member of the ghost hall, I summon my tribe's sacred spirit. Madame G's voice was piercing to the ears, as if bones were rubbing against each other, and her voice echoed in all directions. The instant she said those words, Su Ming's pupil shrank. He could clearly see Madame G's sunken abdomen squirming on her dried-up body. It was as if there was something in her abdomen that was trying to drill a hole in it, and it was swelling up right before his eyes. At first glance, Madame G looked as if she had become pregnant. A large amount of wind was continuously sucked into Madame G's mouth, and her abdomen grew larger. Eventually, she looked as if she had been pregnant for 10 months, but compared to the other parts of her body that were dry, it was a terrifying sight to behold. Veins popped up on Madame G's protruding abdomen. There was also a bump the size of a fist on her abdomen that continued bulging up and down. Piercing laughter came from Madame G. She glared at Su Ming, and the killing intent in her eyes surged into the sky. My husband, Ji Yunhai, was sealed by you. My soul catcher's beauty is useless against you. My curse is useless against you. Ever since I married Ji Yunhai, I've never been hurt like this. Since I can't kill you, then I'll have my baby. I'll have my tribe's sacred spirit, the ghost child, kill you. Madame G's abdomen grew larger, and there was a strange tone to her laughter. She pressed her left hand against her protruding abdomen and seized the air with her right hand. Immediately, a child's toy drum appeared in her hand. Once she let go of her hand, the drum floated to the side. What a diabolical woman. Not only did she kill her own partner, she even wants to use her child to cast an art. The vortex above Su Ming disappeared at that moment, and the area he was limited to was also rapidly becoming weaker. He stared at Madame G and spoke slowly. Diabolical? Madame G started laughing loudly, and the hatred in her laughter was incredibly thick. She looked at Su Ming and screamed shrilly. I'm evil? That's because you haven't seen a truly vicious person. Although my ghost pregnancy shaman division has always been mysterious, we stand aloof from worldly affairs. However, I'm the only one left in my division now. The others are all dead, killed by Ji Yunhai when he experimented with his curse back then. From the elderly who did not have any wizard power to the infants who had just been born, have you ever seen the elderly claw open their chests, dig out their hearts, and swallow them in order to be freed? Have you ever seen a newborn baby wailing in pain as its body rots and dies? Have you ever seen the pain of all the men in the clan having their bones grow out of their flesh and blood? Have you seen all the women in your tribe watching their family members suffer like this, but they themselves couldn't control their own desires? They giggled lustfully and threw themselves in front of the enemy who caused your tribe to suffer like this, crying and swaying their buttocks in a lustful way. Have you seen all of them? You've never seen it. So what right do you have to say that I'm evil? Madame G screamed shrilly. Agitation and hatred appeared on her face, along with sorrow and pain. She lifted her right hand and seized the air once again. This time, a child's toy bow appeared in her hand, and it floated beside the small drum. I'm evil? I'm indeed evil, but my evil is because of Ji Yunhai. Because of him, he killed all my tribe members to experiment with his curse. At that time, I cried and twisted my body. I hated him, hated myself. I prayed to the heavens for help. I prayed to all the gods. As long as someone could help me, I could sacrifice everything, but no one helped me. The god closed his eyes and walked away coldly. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and the rain washed away all traces of the nightmare. After that nightmare, all the males in the tribe died. I saw my husband, my parents, and my newborn daughter among them. Do you know that kind of pain? But the nightmare did not end. All the women in the tribe showed signs of pregnancy due to Ji Yunhai's art. Besides wanting our tribe to experiment with the curse he had just mastered, he also took a fancy to our tribe's sacred spirit. The sacred spirit that we, the ghost pregnancy tribe, have always offered sacrifices to the ghost children. He wanted to forcefully use this evil method to make us women give birth to the ghost children, so that we could become the carriers of his curse and make his curse even stronger. Madame G seemed to have never told anyone about these things. She had hidden them in her heart for who knew how many years. At that moment, she had been forced to this state during the series of battles against Su Ming. That was why, in the midst of her madness, she spilled out all the words in her heart due to Su Ming's evil remark. Everyone died. My sister, my mother, all my sisters in the tribe had their stomachs cut open by Ji Yunhai. They died because they couldn't give birth to the ghost children. Why do you think I'm still alive? It's because I was the only one who successfully gave birth to the ghost children. Giving birth to the ghost children requires a long period of time. That's why I didn't die. I was taken away by Ji Yunhai. He would wait for the ghost children to be born. I became his plaything. Why was I so lascivious? It's because during that period of time, he planted more and more curses in my body, and I became the test subject for his curse. Do I count as one of the most evil people in the world? My innocence in the past made me think that the sky would always be blue. I thought that the dark clouds were only temporary, but the truth was that the blue sky was also a form of oppression. That's why I thought of all sorts of ways to please Ji Yunhai, and in the end, I even used all sorts of methods to find his weakness. I used a full 60 years, and when the ghost child was born, I killed him. I turned him into a puppet, but the price was that the ghost child disappeared. There was only a hint of him left in my body, and it turned into an art that I didn't want to use. I originally thought that everything would end with his death. I originally thought that I would be free to search for a new life and live the rest of my life in a secluded place. But did you know? Did you know? I got used to that sort of life. I got used to being lascivious and ecstatic. I changed. I'm no longer me. I'm no longer the me of the past. As tears fell from Madame G's eyes, she screamed shrilly at Su Ming. She lifted her right hand, and this time, a baby's skull appeared. That skull was blood red, and it floated beside the small drum and the toy bow. As Su Ming listened to Madame G's words, the restrictions around him completely disappeared, but a complicated look appeared on his face. From Madame G's expression and voice, Su Ming could tell that most of what she said was true. Vaguely, he seemed to be able to see a pure and innocent figure that had disappeared in the passage of time behind Madame G. This scar on my face wasn't left on me by someone else. I did it myself. Every single time I couldn't control myself, I would tear it open and destroy my face so that it wouldn't heal, but it's useless. It's useless. I can't control my own body. All of this is because of Ji Yunhai. Madame G looked as if she had gone mad. At that moment, her stomach swelled up, and hatred appeared in her eyes as she glared at Su Ming. I'll kill you and suck dry your flesh and essence so that you'll suffer my pain. Ghost child, baby, be born. Choose your path. If you choose to help me, then kill him. Madame G's shrill voice suddenly turned gentle. She touched her stomach, and the instant pain appeared on her face. A large amount of black mist suddenly spread out from her stomach. As the black smoke spread out, Madame G's stomach swiftly caved in, and in the blink of an eye, a baby's cry rang out. Right before Madame G's eyes, as the large amount of black smoke tumbled about and gathered together, a baby that was completely black appeared. There was a black horn on the baby's head and golden patterns on its face. At that moment, it opened its mouth and revealed its sharp teeth. It was crawling towards the floating small drum, the bow, and the baby's skull. A ghastly chill immediately covered the area when the ghost child appeared, but it was clear that the ghost child was not complete. Its body was rapidly disappearing, and the chill in the area was also rapidly recovering. It was just as Madame G had said. The ghost child at that moment was only a shred of what remained after it disappeared all those years ago. Su Ming sighed and took a step forward, charging towards Madame G. He lifted his right hand, and a faint light shone on it. At the instant, a vast power spread out from Su Ming's body. The ghost child leaped forward and appeared beside the baby's skull. The Japanese child leaped forward and appeared beside the infant's skull. Once he grabbed it, he opened his mouth and bit down. Cracking sounds reverberated in the air, and he crushed the infant's skull. At the same time he swallowed it, he lifted his head, and a dark light appeared in his eyes. The instant he looked toward Su Ming, he charged forward in a flash. Kill him! As Madame G screamed shrilly, the ghost child closed in on Su Ming in the span of a breath. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and Su Ming retreated repeatedly. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth. The ghost child had no form. All of Su Ming's attacks felt as if they were hitting air, but that was not all. The power that he used to hit air actually appeared on his own body in a way that Su Ming could not understand. Su Ming had never encountered this sort of strange art before. As he retreated, a glint appeared in his eyes. It was not as if he did not have any killing moves against formless objects. He lifted his right hand swiftly and drew one line in the direction of the ghost child. One line, Berserker Obliteration. This was the first divine ability Su Ming had created on his own, and it was also the strongest art he possessed among all his divine abilities. This was also the first time he executed the power of the 4 Berserker bones in his body ever since he reached the middle stage of the bone sacrifice realm. The instant he drew that line, an ancient voice reverberated in the air. That was his God of Berserker's song. That voice spread out and contained an awe-inspiring might. As Su Ming drew that line, the ghost child let out a shrill scream of pain. It would have been better if it had been at its peak, but right then, it was only the manifestation of a sliver of its former self. It was already rapidly disappearing, and right then, Su Ming's berserker obliteration, which could pierce through space, touched its body. It was also at the same time that line was drawn that Su Ming's identity was revealed as the god of berserkers' song reverberated in the air, and as his robes were torn due to the powerful force within his body being released, the berserker mark on his body was revealed. You're a berserker. Due to the ghost child being injured, Madame G coughed out a mouthful of blood, and her expression changed drastically. In about 2 more hours, there will be a surprise. I beg for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 415. The ghost child retreated, and as it let out shrill screams of pain, its body rapidly dissipated. When it returned to Madame G's side, there was only a small part of its body left. Just as it was about to completely disappear, it looked at Madame G, and the murderous look in its eyes disappeared. Replacing it was a look of dependence and reluctance to part. Under the complicated look on Madame G's face, the Japanese came to the small drum floating by her side and grabbed it. Then, it revealed a smile that belonged to a baby towards Madame G, and with that smile, its body gradually disappeared. Ashes to ashes. Baby, you're leaving as well. Madame G was momentarily stunned. She lifted her head and looked at Su Ming walking towards her from the distance. There was no longer hatred in her eyes, but a cold, murderous intent to die. You're very strong. If you can continue becoming stronger, then I'll give you a great treasure. This treasure came from ancient times, before the Berserker tribe and the Shaman tribe existed. It is also the source of Ji Yunhai's curse. He obtained this item and learned how to curse. As Madame G spoke, she lifted her right hand and pressed it on the fist-sized scar on the right side of her chest. At the instant she pressed down on that scar, Madame G's right hand's fingers immediately pierced through her flesh and reached in her own body. She staggered a few steps backwards, and when she brought her right hand out, a rib appeared in her hand. That rib belonged to her. There was a red ring on that rib, and it was attached to that rib. Madame G crushed the rib and lifted her left hand to form a seal. A series of incomprehensible runes tumbled out of her mouth, and, as the rib shattered, the red ring instantly floated in midair. With a flash of red light, it let out a buzz and disappeared without a trace. Su Ming's expression changed. He still had his divine sense spread outwards, and during that instant just now, he could vaguely feel that the ring had not disappeared. Instead, it had grown several times larger in an instant. Because of that, the place where he and Madame G were at that moment was within the enlarged ring. Su Ming did not even have time to think. A buzzing sound reached his ears, and it was soon followed by a red line appearing in the horizon in the distance. In the blink of an eye, the world before his eyes turned blood red. If anyone looked down from the sky at that moment, they would be able to vaguely see a circular red thread shrinking tens of thousands of feet around Su Ming. The speed at which it shrank was so quick that it could not be described with words. Su Ming did not even have time to dodge. In fact, he did not even have time to execute all of his killing moves. He did not even have the time to lift his hand. The red thread that was shrinking towards him from all directions was already 100 feet away from him. This red line was the ring. Once the ring grew larger and enveloped Su Ming, it shrank swiftly. Its momentum was not great, but the sense of danger it brought to Su Ming was something rarely seen. Once it shrank completely, Su Ming's body would definitely not be able to withstand it. What would shatter would not just be his body, but his soul as well. Time passed too quickly. Before he could even react, the red thread had already closed in on him. A loud bang reverberated in the air, and Su Ming's body crumbled. Blood mist filled the air, and the only thing left in midair was a small red ring that floated there unmoving. The fire ape had disappeared without a trace. When Su Ming and Madame Ji were fighting against each other, it had already left the land. As for the strange rod snake, it was hiding on the ground according to Su Ming's request a long time ago and staring at Madame Ji coldly. Madame Ji looked at Su Ming disappearing before her and at the floating ring. She instantly relaxed and started laughing in a piercing voice. The hatred in her laughter was still as thick as ever. Ji and Hai, you can seal yourself. My soul catchers are useless against you. My curses can't kill you. And even if the son of hell attacks you, you still have ways to fight back, but now, you still won't definitely die. You're not the first powerful warrior I'll kill with this ring, and you definitely won't be the last. Berserker, I didn't expect you to be a berserker, but that's not important. Your body has already been crushed by the ring, and under that powerful impact, your soul has also disappeared into thin air. Madame Ji's breathing quickened, and her laughter became even more wanton. This might not be your final move, but it was one of the killing moves she believed she could not use easily. She could only control the ring once, and every single time she used it, her head would ache so badly that it felt as if it was going to split open and she would lose all her senses. She would need half a month before she could recover. At that moment, she lifted her right hand and the ring flew towards her. Once she held it in her hand, she turned around, intending to leave. She had already made her decision. Once she completely recovered, she would slaughter Black Crane Tribe. Yet the moment she turned around, a dark light suddenly flashed in the air where the ring had shrunk and floated. Su Ming's body swiftly manifested. His entire body was drenched in blood, and the mask on his face was no longer there. Blood trickled down the corners of his mouth, and his right leg was not very agile. The moment he appeared, he charged towards Madame Ji like a bolt of lightning. During that instant, just now, Su Ming did not have the time to cast any killing moves. However, during the battle, he had already learned how to keep the dimension in the stone constantly open from the time he was chased down by the old berserker. Because of that, he managed to avoid the disaster. However, the ring was too fast. Even if Su Ming had entered the dimension in the stone, he was still injured. Impossible! Madame Ji's expression changed drastically and disbelief appeared on her face. She was just about to retreat, but Su Ming closed in on her even faster. As green light flashed, Madame Ji let out a pained scream and her head flew off. Her arms were also cut off and separated from her body. Her legs exploded at the same time, and the instant they turned into blood mist, her body was sliced into 4 pieces by Su Ming's small sword. All of this happened in an instant. When Su Ming reappeared, he was already in the distance. He was panting harshly, but he did not let down his guard. Instead, at the moment Madame Ji's body was cut into several pieces, he lifted his right hand and formed a seal before pointing at Han Mountain Bell in the distance. He had already decided not to continue fighting against this woman. Madame Ji had too many killing moves, and they came in an endless stream, causing Su Ming to be incredibly apprehensive. It was especially so just now, when he had practically been on the verge of death. At that moment, he no longer hesitated and activated the awakened power of Han Mountain Bell's 5th head. Even if a large amount of his power would be sucked away, Madame Ji should have already reached the end of her many attacks. His chances of killing this person would be much higher than if he had used this move just now. Right at the instant Su Ming formed the seal with his hand, a shrill scream came from Madame Ji's shattered body. Her exploded legs recovered in an instant, and her lost arms swiftly returned to her body. In the blink of an eye, her body reappeared, completely unharmed. However, the presence of her power had become much weaker. Her face was stark pale, and as she screamed, madness appeared on her face. As she screamed, a large amount of 5-colored fog spread out from her body, and all the 5-colored fog in the area started gathering together rapidly. At the same time, the tribe leader of Black Crane trembled on the ground in the distance and rapidly withered away. In the blink of an eye, he was reduced to only skin and bones. His eyes remained shut, but he coughed out blood, his head tilted to the side, and he breathed his last. Once he died, An enchanting wisp of 5-colored fog crawled out his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and swiftly gathered towards Madame G in the distance. This is my final killing move. I refuse to believe that I can't kill you. Madame G let out a piercing scream, and the 5-colored fog around her tumbled and surged about before separating into a ball and turning into a 5-colored peach blossom by her side. However, it did not bloom, but was a bud. Once the 5-colored peach blossom appeared, a lascivious presence immediately spread out. 13 peach blossom fiends. This is the result of the curse Ji Yunhai placed on me for 60 years. He originally wanted to use my body to refine this curse, and once I died, he would take it out and turn it into a fiend. I'll use my life to force out this peach blossom fiend, and I refuse to believe that you won't die. As Madame G screamed, the fog around her scattered with a bang and turned into 12 5-colored peach blossom buds. Together with the 1 peach blossom buds from before, there were now 13 of them. Immediately after, an illusion appeared around Madame G's body. It was a branch that looked like a tree, and with her body as its core, it connected with the 13 peach blossom buds, turning into a peach blossom branch with 13 flowers in midair. Dying, Madame G coughed out blood, and an endless amount of bloody cracks appeared on her body. These bloody cracks were densely packed together, and they were the cracks that had appeared every single time her body shattered over the years. At that moment, all of them appeared, and it was as if her body was made of patches. Blood flowed out from those cracks, and it was clear that this 13 peach blossom fiend was indeed her final killing move. The instant she spoke, the 13 peach blossom buds on the branch in midair bloomed abruptly. Once all of them bloomed, they separated from the branch and charged towards Su Ming. Southern Emperor of the 9-headed dragons, form execution. At that moment, Su Ming's face was pale and a cold glare shone in his eyes. He had also finished forming the seals and pointed at Han Mountain Bell. Instantly, a violent bell chime came from the bell, and as it rang, the 9-headed dragon's shadow appeared in the sky above Han Mountain Bell. The 6 heads of the gigantic 9-headed dragon woke up, and Su Ming's shadow could be seen in their pupils. Once it let out a shocking roar, the 6 heads moved at the same time, and with a presence that shook the sky and earth, they charged towards the 13 peach blossom fiend that was charging towards Su Ming. The loud booming sounds could be heard even in White Bull Tribe. Black Crane Tribe also heard the booming sounds coming from Su Ming's side, causing terror to appear on the faces of the people from Black Crane Tribe and White Bull Tribe, and they looked towards the direction where the sounds came from. The 13 peach blossom fiend disappeared one by one as they crashed into the 9-headed dragon. With each peach blossom that disappeared, the cracks on Madame G's body would split open a little more, and her body would be covered in blood. When only 4 of the 13 peach blossoms remained, despair appeared in Madame G's eyes. She let out a piercing screech, and madness appeared on her face. Her body exploded with a bang. She knew that she would definitely die, and at the cost of her own early death, she wanted to drag Su Ming to hell with her. After he chose to explode his body and die, 3 of the 4 peach blossoms also collapsed. Their collapse caused the last peach blossom to change from 5 colors to a single color. It was pink, a pink that was filled with an aura of lust. That pink peach blossom pierced through the 9-headed dragon's transformation. When most of it disappeared, it appeared before Su Ming and turned into a wisp of pink aura. When Su Ming's expression changed and he escaped into the dimension in the stone fragment, that pink aura followed him and crawled into his nose. Su Ming's body twisted and he was squeezed out of the dimension in the stone fragment. His face instantly turned red, and a conflicted look appeared in his eyes. His rationality and his desire were fighting against each other furiously. This chapter is the surprise mentioned previously. Perhaps it can't be considered a surprise. Haha, but I did not forget to add more chapters. I will occasionally add more chapters, and it won't be counted in the explosion during the weekend. He's so kind that he deserves everyone's vote for him. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 416. It was quiet all around them. Moonlight shone on the ground. If anyone looked at the air, they would find that the moonlight was filled with a gentle feeling. But if they looked at the ground, they would be shocked. There were a lot of minced flesh on the ground, and there were quite a lot of bloodstains mixed in. As the wind blew, the stench of blood lingered in the air, lingering in the air for a long time. There was a red ring flashing with a red light in one of the minced flesh. Not too far away in the distance was a pink bag, but it was also damaged by then. There was also a dried-up corpse on the ground in the distance. That corpse belonged to the man from Black Crane tribe. That person had died an incredibly wretched death. His entire body was practically just skin and bones. Not only was there not a single hint of flesh on him, he also looked like a withered twig. His face no longer bore any resemblance to when he was alive. His eyes were sunken deeply, making him look like a skeleton. All the essence and life in his body had disappeared without a trace. A rotten stench came from the lower half of his body, and when it fused with the stench of blood in the air, it turned into an indescribably foul stench. Xiaohong's whereabouts were unknown. When Su Ming was fighting against Madame Ji, it had run away as if it had gone mad. Under the moonlight, Su Ming sat cross-legged on the ground. His body trembled and his eyes were shut tightly. His face was flushed red, and a large amount of veins popped up on his skin. There was pain and struggle on his face. It was difficult for Su Ming to avoid Madame Ji's final Peach Blossom Fiend's counterattack before she died. Once that Peach Blossom Fiend seeped into his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, it immediately turned into an urge and desire that Su Ming could barely control. That desire was madly attacking his rationality, and once it won over everything else, then he would no longer be able to control his own actions. At that moment, Su Ming's mind was a mess. The figures of all the women he had met in his life flashed past his mind and turned into moans and seductive movements, causing Su Ming's breathing to become increasingly rapid. After an unknown amount of time, Su Ming opened his eyes. They were bloodshot, and he looked incredibly ferocious. It was especially so for a ball of fire that looked as if it was burning in the depths of his pupils. As that ball of fire burned, Su Ming lifted his head and let out a roar towards the sky. His roar reverberated in the air and spread in all directions. This isn't a simple aphrodisiac. It's a curse that triggers the body's primal urges. The struggle on Su Ming's face became stronger. At that moment, he could still somewhat retain his rationality, and with what little was left of it, he quickly analyzed the feeling in his body and connected it with the understanding he gained from Madame Ji's past during his fight against her. It was not difficult for him to guess that this so-called Peach Blossom Fiend was the thing Ji Yunhai had planted in Madame Ji's body in the past. After 60 years of continuous improvement, this item was now extremely strong. The scenes that fill my head are all lewd and evil. If my body is controlled by desire, then I will become like Madame Ji. Even if I find a woman and act according to my instincts, I will definitely not be able to get rid of this art. And I have a feeling that once I can't control myself and sink into it, I will have to stay like this forever, and it will be very difficult for me to get out, unless I can rely on my own strength to suppress this body's desires. Su Ming quickly lifted his right hand, and a red glare appeared in his eyes. He quickly tapped a few spots on his body, but it was to no avail. Even the black stone fragment on his neck did not show any reaction. The black stone fragment can allow me to not be affected by external objects, but now, there are no external objects around me that can threaten me. The primal urges in my body have been magnified by this Peach Blossom Fiend. If that's the case, then it's only natural that the black stone fragment is useless. Su Ming trembled even more violently. His hair was no longer black, but a fiery red hue started appearing at the roots of his hair. The red hue at the roots of his hair was spreading rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, half of Su Ming's hair had turned crimson. At the same time, the pink hue on his face settled down, causing his face to return to its original pale state. However, the fading pink hue gathered on Su Ming's chest. Veins popped up on Su Ming's face as if they were about to explode. The mark of the sword shone at the center of his brows, and the small virescent sword was forced out. It let out a sword whistle that echoed around him, as if it was incredibly anxious. Su Ming lifted his hands and gripped the ground by his sides, sinking his hands deep into the ground. As the mark of the sword disappeared, the mark of a peach blossom gradually appeared at the center of his brows. At the same time, most of his hair turned red, and his entire person looked as if he had changed drastically. He looked like a completely different person compared to his previously calm self. A large amount of sweat broke out on his body. The appearance of that sweat caused an indescribable stench to spread out from Su Ming's body. If a woman smelled that stench, their minds would immediately be thrown into chaos, and they would not be able to control themselves. Su Ming's expression became even more pained. He gripped the ground with both hands and used almost all his strength, but the power of this peach blossom fiend was simply too great. Su Ming persevered for a long time, and the instant the mark of the peach blossom completely appeared at the center of his brows, his hair turned completely crimson. At that instant, Su Ming could no longer suppress his desires. He lifted his head and let out the strongest roar he had ever let out since he came to the land of the shamans. Roar! As he roared, Su Ming flew up from the ground with bloodshot eyes. There was no longer any rationality in his eyes. The only thing that existed was the impulse brought forth by that primal desire. Once he flew up, the north was right before him, and without a hint of hesitation, Su Ming charged forward. He was so quick that he turned into a long arc in midair and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. He did not even put away Han Mountain Bell, the red ring, and the other items. He simply charged forward, and with this speed, he soon covered the distance of 10,000 lis. As he charged forward, Su Ming continued roaring. Those low growls echoed in the air as he charged forward, sounding like a wild beast, and all those who heard them could not help but feel apprehensive. It was midnight at that moment. Most of the tribe members of White Bull Tribe in the north were asleep. Even if there were some who were awake, most of them were patrolling the area. Besides them, there was only the patriarch of White Bull Tribe. The monkey-faced old man was sitting in his house at that moment, holding a small plate of round beans the size of a fingernail. Occasionally, he would eat one, and there was a satisfied look on his face. Yet right when he narrowed his eyes and picked up another bean, just as he was about to bite into it, a shocking howl suddenly traveled into his ears. The appearance of that sound stunned the old man. Once he opened his eyes, his expression changed drastically. He did not care about the small plate of beans that fell to the ground and quickly rushed out of his house. When he lifted his head to look, his pupils shrank and shock appeared in his eyes. A long arc charged forward in the sky and closed in on him in the blink of an eye, turning into Su Ming. His long red hair, his eyes filled with madness, and that deep growl was enough to let anyone see that there was something off about him with just one glance. The monkey-faced old man's heart shuddered, and he immediately let out a piercing howl. As he did so, the entire tribe immediately woke up from their slumber. The tribe members walked out of their houses in shock, and the instant the men and women saw Su Ming in midair, he also saw them. A look of struggle appeared on Su Ming's face once again, causing his growl to become even stronger. The monkey-faced old man immediately flew up and glared at Su Ming as if he was facing a great enemy. All the warriors in the tribe around him stared at Su Ming. As long as the old man gave the order, they would attack without care for their own safety to protect their tribe. The monkey-faced old man was groaning in his heart. He could clearly tell that Su Ming was close to madness at that moment. He might not know what caused him to be in this state, but it was clear that he had lost all rationality. Once this sort of person went mad, then the damage he would cause to the tribe would be incredibly great. It was especially so when the women in the tribe walked out of their houses and looked at the sky in fear. The old man could clearly see Su Ming trembling, and the struggle on his face made him look as if he was about to break down. Go back. The old man let out a low growl, and the normal tribe members who had walked out of their houses quickly retreated while trembling. Yet right at the instant the women were about to retreat, their bodies suddenly jolted, and their faces flushed red. A dazed look appeared in their eyes, and they looked at Su Ming in the sky as if they had lost their minds. This change instantly caught the attention of the other people in the tribe, and they were shocked as well. Some of the warriors in the tribe even roared in anger and wanted to attack Su Ming, but the instant they wanted to attack, they were immediately stopped by the old patriarch. The old man stared at Su Ming. He could see through his current condition. If they took the initiative to attack, and Su Ming fought back, he would definitely go mad. At that time, it would be a disaster for the entire White Bull tribe. More importantly, the old man could clearly sense a strong sense of danger spreading out from Su Ming's body. That sense of danger caused his heart to tremble. He had a vague feeling that the current Su Ming was much more terrifying than when he had first met him. This was just a feeling. There was no proof. With his level of cultivation, he could not see too much. He could only vaguely feel that the strong sense of danger came from within Su Ming's body. It was as if there was a terrifying power within him that could make him tremble. It was as if that existence was slowly waking up. This is aphrodisiac. The old man saw the abnormality in the women in his tribe, and when he combined it with the faint fear in his heart, he gritted his teeth and made a decision that made all the people in the tribe angry, but did not dare to fight back. In fact, this decision could even affect his position in the tribe. In fact, even he himself found it hard to make this decision, but he had a strong feeling that once Su Ming went mad, then what awaited their tribe would be complete destruction. It was especially so at that moment, when he once again sensed the signs of the power that terrified him in Su Ming's body waking up, becoming clearer. In fact, most of the other tribe members had also sensed it, and their hearts started trembling. Xiala, Hua, Xiaoyun, you three girls fly up. Once the old man said those words through gritted teeth, the only 3 women in the tribe who practiced the art of shamans flew up with glazed eyes and walked towards Su Ming, who was struggling in midair. To be continued. If you like this work, please come come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.